All right, good evening and welcome everyone to the regular session of Solvang City Council for Monday, June 28th. I will now call the meeting to order at 6:30.
Roll call. Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Infante.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Arona.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Mayor Yurek.
Here.
All present.
I think I'm here. All right. Councilmember Thomas, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Place your right hand over your heart and repeat with me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Madam City Clerk, would you read the next item?
The next item on the agenda is ceremonial items and commendations, and we do have a second part of the Years of Service Awards today. And we have two employees here with us who have reached quite significant milestones. They're both from the wastewater division. So I'll start with our 10 years of service anniversary, and that is Trevor Holly. He's been he is a wastewater treatment plant operator 3, and he has reached his 10 years of service on December 13, 2019. So he's actually well past that, but we'd like to recognize his 10 years today. So Trevor, if you'd come up and receive your award.
Trevor.
Let me get in on that.
You were in the previous one, so.
He's tall.
All right, 1, 2, 3. I'll do one this way too. 1, 2, 3.
Does that one add 10 pounds to you when you go live?
All right, and now we have for the big reveal here of a 20 years anniversary goes to Jeff Morse, wastewater treatment operator 2, and he has reached 20 years just recently on April 6, 2021. So congratulations, Jeff.
One, two, three. In case there's the 10 pounds question, we'll do one this way.
Thank you. Appreciate
1,
that.
2, 3.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Congratulations to both of you guys. Thank you for all the work that you guys have done for wastewater in the city of Solvang and all of our residents. Madam Clerk, next item.
Next item is public communications, written or verbal. The council welcomes your input at this time. You may address council on items not on the agenda and consent agenda.
I do not have any speaker slips up here, and so if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to address any items that are not on the agenda
Or consent agenda.
or consent agenda. Seeing none.
There is nobody with us on Zoom either from the public, so seeing no public comment.
Wow, okay, great. We'll move back to city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. The good news today is yet another change in regulations, and as you can see, we can see everybody's faces today. There's no more masks.
Sorry.
So Now
Just
we'll
keep
have
smiling,
to
Robert.
we'll have to get used to everyone's full emotions and facial expressions. But Cal OSHA has changed their regulations that apply to employers, and so now employers are no longer required to require face coverings from employees or others in the place of employment. But they should establish a list of vaccinated and non-vaccinated employees, and those who are fully vaccinated do not have to wear face coverings, while those who are not vaccinated are required to wear coverings while indoors and less than 6 feet away from others. So we have a full room here today with us with people without face coverings. So this is exciting. Just to remind everybody that we just sent out the next quarterly newsletter. This is the third one in the series. The newsletters were implemented earlier this year, starting with the winter quarter. The summer quarter newsletter is out and going out with the utility bills to all the utility billing customers. We are happy to be celebrating the economic recovery of COVID-19. So the theme of the newsletter is definitely economic recovery, which you will see throughout the agenda today as well. We are continuing to go forward with the general plan update for the City of Solvang. Once again, reminder to everybody to go to www.plansolvang.com, which is a dedicated website, and sign up for any updates that come through. There is a summary of the community feedback to date that's published there that I would encourage everybody to review. And the next steps will be for GPAC, DRC, and then Planning Commission and the Council to be discussing and adopting a vision statement and guiding principles which will guide the rest of the general plan update. Those will be informed by the prior community input, and then the next opportunity for community to participate in general plan update will be coming up in October-November timeframe, when we'll be talking to the community about alternatives. So where we are now, going towards the how do we achieve the vision using the guiding principles, and what are the alternative choices that the community would like to see that will be all incorporated into the general plan. Now, another picture that I had here on this slide was the Solvang Festival Theater remodel. Just a reminder and to let everybody know again that the construction phase will break ground in September. So you will see a lot of construction going on at the Solvang Theater Fest. They are redoing the foundation. So it's a major project of $4.7 million, and their campaign committee for the donations has kicked off their post-COVID-19 efforts, and so they're still asking for donations to reach the total budget, and more information can be found at their website at www.solvangtheaterfest.org. The summer is in season, and so are all of the recreation programs. We are now in fully back in business, in operations, with all of the restrictions being lifted. So there's lots of demand on recreation programs. Spaces are limited, but all of our programs are back and functioning. A reminder that there's the new pickleball courts that had opened up recently. So everybody please go out to Hans Christian Andersen Park, check out the new pickleball courts and try those out. Parks reservations are now available, and to make a parks reservation, you can either call the City Hall or you can stop by our City Hall office here. Once again, reminding that we are in stage 1 drought. So in the newsletter, we have a full page dedicated to the subject matter, informing all of our utility customers, all of our water customers, that they should be conserving water. We are in voluntary 15% conservation ask, and there's some very specific instructions that are listed there as well that I went over last council meeting. Now, our wastewater treatment plant upgrade phase 1 is in construction phase, and it is in progress. And then another big project that will be kicking off would be the Alisol Road pavement reconstruction project, which is scheduled for groundbreaking in July of 2021, so next month. More information will be coming out on that, and we'll be seeing our Measure A dollars at work on that project, which funded the project. And I'd just like to remind everybody that we do have the newly implemented Employee of the Quarter program running. We had our first employee that's featured in this newsletter as well, Debbie Curtis. And we are looking for nominations for the next Employee of the Quarter. And so everybody, including our employees, council members, or the public, can make a nomination by going to our city website and then going to the Employee Awards section of the website. Now, events are back. So we are happy to, after not being able to have an Independence Parade last year, very happy to say that Solvang Rotary is able to pull off this year's parade. It will be a modified route and will not go through the Mission Drive because that requires a Caltrans permit. And due to COVID-19 and the timing of the restrictions and changes, we were not able to receive that from Caltrans. But there will be a lot more information coming out with an alternative route that will go through Copenhagen Street instead of the Mission Drive. So there will be a parade on July 4th at 11 a.m. And if anybody would like to enter and be part of the parade, we have a form on our city website that can be filled out and submitted by June 30th. Now, the Music in the Park had kicked off last week. I saw that there was quite a bit of turnout. I think Mayor would have a lot more to say as the performer at the park. It looked like there was a lot of fun.
Weak, but everything else was really good.
It was loud. It was rocking them.
It was power chords.
That's it. It's good.
So that will continue to go on Wednesdays. And then the latest announcement on events is the fact that Danish Days have announced that they will actually hold Danish Days this year. So that's a great comeback. It will be a 2-day instead of a 3-day celebration, but it will take place on September 17 and 18, which is Friday and Saturday. Now moving on to the advance calendar. On July 12th, which is the next council agenda, you will have the reports about Skid Mesa code enforcement efforts. It's been 60 days since you last directed staff to enforce the municipal code there, so we'll be coming back to you with an update on how that's going and what's going successful and where there may be some additional recommendations. We'll be also looking at the wastewater treatment plant phase 2 versus alternative 3 versus alternative 2. That will be the policy direction on what type of project we'll continue to work on and move forward with. And there may be some additional contract extensions and amendments based on your today's actions and adoption of the fiscal year 21-22 financial plan. And then finally, we'll have the first reading of an ordinance forming the Tourism Advisory Committee. If you would remember, at the last council meeting, you gave general positive direction to form a tourism or tourism marketing advisory committee. So we'll be coming back to you with the actual ordinance and formation, how that's proposed to be structured. Now, I would like to request that we potentially hold a closed session on July 14th because it's dedicated that week will be dedicated for negotiations with the union. So I would like to mark your calendars, if possible, for July 14th closed session as a conference with labor negotiators per Government Code Section 54957.6. If we could do that at 6 p.m., that would be preferred.
Oh, that's Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday. We could do it earlier. It's up to the mayor. But actually, if you could let me know if you're available, we could just make that decision right now.
Yes.
I'm seeing nods from everybody. 6 p.m.
At 6, yeah.
on the 14th? Okay.
If I can get earlier, I could try to do earlier, so.
Okay, and I can always coordinate with council
Okay,
afterwards.
I'll see how that
You can
works.
circle back. Okay, thank you. All right, so looking at the future agendas, we actually currently have a very light July 26th agenda. I would like, originally we had the Council and Planning Commission meeting scheduled or penciled for that date as a joint session for the vision and the guiding principles. But since we have worked the GPAC into the process, that meeting needs to slide forward to August 23rd to allow the GPAC to sufficiently work through the mission statement and the guiding principles. So I'd like to move that. So having said that, July 26th right now looks very light as far as council agenda. It's not to say that there won't be a lot of things going on within the organization, because this would be just past the budget adoption. So if the budget is adopted within the proposed budget as it stands now, there will be lots of processes and reorganization to kick off in July. So we'll be busy internally within the organization. But if there is anything that you would like to request that you think that we could address on July 26th, please let me know. And we may have a couple of closed session matters on that date as well, one related to water and then continuous labor negotiation potentially. On August 9, you will have the first public hearing for elections by district, which will be a fairly broad report. Then we'll have the general fund fees update, which will include all of the reviewed general fund fees to current levels of costs. And with that, I would also like to bring to you some discussion about the prioritization of the Veterans Hall use and also the fees that are being charged for that. We'll have the updated Public Works standards details and then water system risk and resiliency study presentation to you. On August 23rd, as I mentioned, we'll have the vision and guiding principles as a joint meeting between Council and Planning Commission, is how it's thought to be in this process. And then we'll have the second hearing for elections by district, and finally the phase 3 of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, which is the recycled water. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the city manager's report? All right. Moving on to item number 3.
Item number 3 is council comments, requests, and advance calendar.
Does anyone have anything that they'd like to share? Go ahead, Councilmember Infante. Okay.
Reporting a couple things. The city manager had talked about the fact that the pickleball court was open. I don't know who it was. Somebody on Nextdoor has advertised that they're going to be a pickleball training, an introduction to playing pickleball. I don't know how you get to it. It's on Nextdoor. You have to go look it up. But that I thought was kind of interesting. Pardon me. The Air Pollution Control District meeting back on June 17th. Because of the potential fires and everything, there is a Clean Air Rooms pilot program. They're going to buy 1,000 HEPA air filters for low-income residents in the Guadalupe and surrounding areas. But the website also tells you how to build your own room air filter. And it talks about how you do this with air conditioning filters and things of that nature. Back in September of 2020, during 45 days, the Clean Air Grants and Incentives update, there were 79 applications, including 1 for marine, 2 school buses, 8 infrastructure, 17 off-road machinery, which is construction and farm equipment. So there was quite a response to that. There was an old car buyback program that's going on, and they are going to start accepting landscape equipment electrification funding for applicants in August for about 30 days. So anybody that's doing any kind of weed whacking, blowers, lawnmowers, all that kind of stuff is all available, and you'll have to go onto the Air Pollution Control District website and take a look and see what it is. It's ourair.org, our, O-U-R, air.org, one word. And it's a LEAF, L-E-E-F, Landscape Equipment Electrification Fund program. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, as far as the 26th, I don't know if it's something that we need to put on the agenda or it can just be discussed this evening, but I'm getting a lot of conversations and comments from residents, especially because I live down off of Fjord, about the Fjord brew. So I would like for us to address that. I know it's been on the capital improvement plan for a long time. It seems to get carried over as well as the general plan, but if we can let the residents know what the exact intentions are of the city and where we're going with the Fjord Drive. I know that when people bought their houses back in the early 80s, they were informed that that road would be going through, and then the golf course got put in, and then people bought their houses afterwards. But it's a big concern down there. I think if we ever go to districts, and if I ever decide to run again, that's something that's going to be a big issue for me. Which, getting back to the district election, I think it's very funny that all it takes now, if you're in a district, is 400 votes to get seated on the city council for such a small town. Because anyway, that's a whole different story. So between that, also the Copenhagen closure and farmers market, I think I'd like to address that at the next meeting, because I hear about 50-50, keeping it where it is, keeping it closed, keeping it open, etc. Some of the businesses on First Street would like to see the street back open because they have more parking on their areas, etc. So between Copenhagen closure, farmers market, and then the Fjord, I'd like to see that stuff addressed at a future meeting if we could. And then lastly, I don't know if the town has a problem here, and I wish that Lieutenant Green or Captain Green was here, but, People Helping People was in the news this last week, and they do an amazing job for Solvang and an amazing job for the community. And they've hired a diversity coordinator in an effort to address an increase in hate crimes, racial slurs, discrimination, and bias in our community. And I've lived in several towns, and I always thought we lived in Disneyland and the happiest place on earth, and maybe I don't know about it. But apparently they worked with Inclusion SYV to come up with this position. And Inclusion SYV on their website states that local survey data suggests in the workplace, supermarket, on the streets, local residents are subject to bullying, bigotry, racial ethnicity, racial epithets every single day. And that's a quote. And I don't know if that's exaggeration, I don't know if I'm just blind, but I'd like to have that addressed, because those are some pretty serious allegations about a pretty happy town. And I may be totally lost, but I think that's something that I'd like to talk to Lieutenant Green about. If we truly have hate crimes existing in Solvang every day, it's bad for tourism and it's bad for residents. So I think it would be, I don't want to say I was insulted by it, because this is my town and I think we're a pretty happy bunch and we get along pretty well, but if that's an issue, then it needs to be addressed. And I'd like to get Lieutenant Green's comments on that as well. So that's all I got.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else have anything?
I do. I would like to report on the meeting that I attended on Friday, June 25th, with Assembly Member Bennett and District Supervisor Joan Hartman, along with members of the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. There were a couple of past and current people serving on the County Planning Commission regarding the bike path that we would like to, and I say we as a community in general, that would connect Bealton with Solvang, and there are talks of connecting it from Solvang to Santa Ynez for a variety of reasons. For one, it would like to be encouraged for the residents to look at alternative modes of transportation, not only using their cars but their bikes, and there's also an interest on developing a trail for equestrians and bikes and hikers. And right now there is some funding available that will expedite this project, just regarding between Solvang and Bealton. And so right now there are talks that involve the consent of private property owners that would make this path possible without encroachments on easements in public property. And so right now they are working on getting that approval from property owners. and that is where it's at. I would look forward to see where that project goes if these property owners decide to consent to that.
Who's heading that up?
SBK.
Part of SBK.
You didn't mention horse-drawn conveyances.
Well, equestrian, that would be both riders and drivers, I think.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a very robust discussion on that. I've received a lot of comments from the day I was elected to now, even regarding that plan. So it's,
Yes, and usually the problem is when the bike path goes near certain neighborhoods. I get a lot of comments from people living in the mobile home park. This particular arrangement would not involve the mobile home park, so maybe.
so the bike path would stay down by the riverbed?
By the
Instead of
riverbed
coming up
and
the
would
fjord?
go through a private
South side of the river.
south side of the river.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
So-
yeah. Many of these property owners have thoughts of developing either equestrian facilities or glamping facilities, which is a very fancy way to camp in like bubbles and things like that. So it would encourage people to stay there and maybe create a nice collaboration between SBCAG and local property owners.
Mr. Carabello at SB CAG told me that when there was, that original plan came down through the mobile home park, it was about a $12 million project. The money could come out of Caltrans ATP, but it was, the first on the list would be a lower income area, which we don't qualify for. So the fact that there is money out there doesn't necessarily equate to us being able to get it. So that's gonna be an interesting situation all the way around. Plus, there's environmental issues, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. And of course, this hasn't even gone through environmental review. First, they need to make sure that the property owners that this would involve are willing to do it. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and that would include Alisal property too. correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
A good portion of it would be. Are there any other reports or anything? I have a couple. One, just the SBCAG meeting that I attended back on the 17th. And revenue from Measure A funds is up significantly. And our area actually got a 3.9 million that was collected just in March, which is up 84% from a year prior to the COVID-19 public health crisis. Receipts comparatively are up to 35%, and so that's good news for SBCAG and all of us as cities for being recipients of that money to be able to deliver some of the projects that we're talking about even right now, with that one of them possibly being the San Ynez Valley Bike Trail. One thing I think I had mentioned at the last one was the road stops or the rest stops area throughout the state. A lot of them are under construction, and Caltrans kind of did a reversal on that. And so there is actually a website for, it's called quickmap.ca.gov. And that is actually the Caltrans Quick Map, which gives you every single road and rest area that's closed throughout throughout California in the structure, because they're trying to make sure that they don't have, all of them on, say, Interstate 5, all of them closed for 500 miles. I know I couldn't last that. So
Starbucks.
Starbucks, yes. Anyways, so that was one thing that was out there as far as just a bit of information. And then the other one was that SBCAG was a recipient of a $200,000 fiscal year Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant, which was awarded for the Central Coast Zero Emission Vehicle Strategy stuff. So that will help. Hopefully, the funding will start coming up in this next year, and that will be used for some of the EV and the smog stuff like that. So that's good news for that. And then getting to people helping people, as you were mentioning, I have asked, Mary Conway is retiring, and so she has Maggie Johnson as coming in to take her position out there at the St. Ines Valley Youth Drug Coalition. And so I was asking them if they would come and do a presentation here. And I was actually suggesting the 26th of July, and it'd be about a 10 or 15 minute presentation. And Valerie Kissel from People Helping People, the new executive director, will also, I believe, be a part of that. So we may be able to get some answers
I would hope
on some of that stuff that you were asking about. I do know that when I worked one of the details at the high school, there was a lot of that at the high school. Didn't notice that there was anything here in Salt Lake per
If I can
se.
interrupt, that was I was raised by a single mom, went to 3 different high schools. I'm aware of bullying in high schools.
Yeah,
But as far as, it was not mentioned about the high schools, just mentioned about the town.
right,
And that's what made me nervous. I'd love to talk to her about that.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt her.
So, no. And then just a little update on the food bank progress that has been going on still over at Bethania. June 15th, which is week 65, there were 336 households served. First time were 54. There was 1,332 individuals served that day. And last Tuesday on the 22nd, which was week 66, 307 households, 1,268 individuals. First time in June were 60. So that's still a significant amount of people that are still having the food insecurities that we're grateful for the food bank in Bethania and all the people that help out with all of that over there. And that's, I think, and then the music in the park this week is Livewire. They'll be there 5 to 8. And we're grateful for the chamber for being able to put out some live music. It's really fun. And it was really nice actually to be a part of the first one and see so many people out there. It was really fun for all of us that got to play up there. So thank you, Tracy, and the chamber for putting that all together for our Solvang and for the community as a whole. I think that wraps up our council comments and advanced calendar items. Madam Clerk, would you please read the next item?
Next item is number 4, consent agenda. Approval of agenda as presented. Approval of minutes of regular city council meeting on June 14, 2021. Received Santa Barbara County Sheriff monthly status report from May 2021. And second reading of ordinance establishing regulations for electronic trolleys operations within the city limits.
If I may, Mayor Urick, I will be recusing myself from this item as I have an interest in electric trolleys in town.
Okay. We could have a motion. Does she need to recuse herself for
Sure.
that from here or just not vote?
Or just not vote.
We could,
She should leave and come back.
Should leave.
I know it's short, but yes.
okay, okay.
Thank you.
Don't go too far.
You forgot your bottle.
Because we could have a motion just to accept item 4D and then have her come back and have her be
That's
part of
an
that.
option.
I think would be the appropriate.
Yes,
Is
that,
that
we
be
can do
right?
that.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept?
How about the whole consent agenda, can't we just?
Well, she
All
can
right,
vote on
4D,
the other
okay.
3 items, just not the one.
I'll move we accept the consent agenda item 4D.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Infante.
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Maroni has recused herself. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Mayor Urick.
Yes.
Passes 4-0.
All right, can we have her come back in now? Thank you.
She went in empty-handed and came back with stuff.
Yes. There's snacks in there for everyone. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda 4A through C?
I'll make a motion to accept a consent agenda items A, B, and C.
And a second?
Second?
And
Councilmember
Roll call.
Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Infante.
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Maroni.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Mayor Urick.
Yes,
Passes 5-0.
thank you. All right.
Okay, now I'll get the parking study.
Madam City Clerk, would you please read item number 5?
Item number 5 is receive parking study presentation. Receive parking study presentation. City conducted a parking study in fiscal year 2021. The parking study will be used to inform the general plan update. So the recommendation today is just to receive the parking study, which was done, actually started before COVID-19, but was completed during COVID-19. We are not asking for any specific direction from you, but for broad policy direction to develop the next steps. The parking study will be used as part of the general plan update. So when it comes to bigger items such as building parking structures and whatnot, the general plan update will inform us better about the overall circulation and land use issues. So that's what that meant to be, but we have a consultant here who performed the parking study who will be doing the presentation today. And following the presentation, there may be there's different recommendations. Some of them are easier to implement than others. So we are looking for your general policy direction at the end of this presentation. And with that, I would like to invite our consultant to introduce himself and walk us through the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Erg and Honorable Council members. My name is Jeff Wexstein, and I'm with Walker Consultants. We prepared the parking study for the tourist-related commercial zone, and I'm going to go through a brief presentation that speaks to the highlights of the study and the recommendations.
If you could have the slides up.
Thank you. You can advance this slide. So just a quick overview of my presentation. We're going to talk about the study area for the presentation, how we collected our data, what current conditions look like when we did our data collection and observations, future conditions, and then go into the high-level recommendations from the study. You can advance. Quick note on methodology. So, in 4 basic steps. First is the data collection, and for this study we did parking occupancy counts, parking inventory, which is collecting the number of parking spaces, public parking spaces downtown, and we did a parking turnover analysis, which is to see how often a parking space turns and how long visitors and employees are parking for. And then also general observations throughout our site visit.
Yeah, just a little bit louder.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, I might have to slouch.
Or just speak louder.
Yeah.
There we go.
Second step is just analyzing the current parking needs based on our field work and the data we collect. The third step was modeling future parking needs. For this step, we took some projected development in the downtown and the tourist-related commercial zone. And then the fourth step is just providing results and recommendations from the study. So this is a quick look at the study area. We collected all public parking within the tourist-related commercial zone. We also grabbed the Solvang Elementary School parking lot, since that is an overflow parking area during busy times, the Veterans Hall lot, and then several of the larger private parking facilities, which would include the Mission, the World Mark, the Hotel Cork, the Solvang Village Square, and the Solvang Windmill lot. There are other sources of parking within the downtown, private parking. There's small lots that are 5, 10, 15, 20 spaces kind of sprinkled throughout. We did not collect data from those, and I can talk about that a little bit more later, why we chose to exclude them. Thank you. So our data collection it did occur during the COVID-19 pandemic. Originally, as the city manager alluded to, we were scheduled to kick this off sooner, but because of COVID-19, we waited. We did collect our counts on a holiday weekend. Typically, we don't recommend assessing a parking system based on a holiday weekend like the 4th of July, because that tends to be the peak of the peak, and you don't want to plan your parking for that. But given the pandemic, we thought that since we were in a lull, when the curve went down for a while before the winter, plus it being a long weekend, we thought that was as close to a summer weekend as we were going to get. And as we go through results, I think it worked out well. We collected parking occupancy counts on both Saturday and Sunday, and then a parking turnover study, which was done every 2 hours in about 1/3 of the public parking spaces. And then we collected a couple counts on Sunday as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll just go over existing conditions. So downtown, there's about 900 approximately public parking spaces, about 500 on-street spaces, and that's not including the spaces that are currently closed on Copenhagen Drive. That's about 60 additional parking spaces. And then the public off-street spaces, including the elementary school lot and the lot next to us here, is about 400 spaces. there's about 109 additional spaces in the Veterans Memorial Hall parking lot, some of which are designated for RVs. And then the private supply that we collected is about 655 spaces. So you can see here that the private supply does make up a good chunk of spaces. And if you include the nooks and crannies, you probably have just as many private parking spaces downtown, if not more, than public parking spaces. So Saturday, excuse me, the peak occurred on Saturday approximately 1 p.m. We did our counts throughout the day from approximately 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. The peak was lunchtime. Approximately 90% of public parking spaces were occupied. You can see those highlighted in red. Even the lot here by City Hall, as well as the elementary school lot, were close to full. On-street parking was generally full until you got further south than Alisal. Then you can see all the green in the map. That's your Veterans Hall lot and all of your private parking, some of your private parking facilities. I will note the Mission was closed when we did our count, so that is probably making that count lower. But you can see places like the Solvang Village Square had very little parking in it on a weekend when the rest of your downtown was pretty packed and people were looking for spaces. So I'm going to talk about the length of stay and the turnover study a little bit. It's a little hard to see in this graphic, but the yellow lines are where we collected turnover data. And the way we do this is it's a license plate survey. We did it by hand. We write down the last 4 digits of the license plate, so we don't have any identifying information and no privacy concerns. So we write down the last 4 digits of the license plate in the spots we surveyed, and we did that every 2 hours. And that was to determine how long people were staying for. It was about 320 spaces all told. We did some in the public lots and then some in the on-street parking areas. And the results were that the majority of vehicles in the core of your downtown are staying about 1 to 2 hours. There was 45 vehicles parked longer than 6 hours. These are likely employees, business owners, and in some cases residents, since you do have some residential within your tourist-related commercial zone, so that they have the ability to park on street as well. And on this slide, we wrote that it represents 5% of the 900 public parking spaces, but actually since we just did the turnover of 320 spaces, it's more like 14% of the spaces downtown at the peak at lunchtime when people were circling your public lots, coming in and out, sitting parked in the drive aisles, hoping somebody would leave. 14% of the spaces were occupied by long-term parkers that weren't moving for several hours to come. Sunday was very similar to Saturday. The peak again occurred at lunchtime. Slightly lower peak, you can see in the graphic. The elementary school lot was not quite as full, and some of the on-street is a little less full, but generally the same conditions on both Saturday and Sunday. In this case, it was a holiday weekend, so Sunday was not your end of the weekend. So some of the key findings for our existing parking demand, one that stands out, everyone probably knew before we did this study, is that public parking availability is low. Visitors need to search longer for an available space, particularly during your lunchtime peak. We did note that lunchtime was definitely the peak. The activity tended to die down well before the dinner hour, and the dinner bump was not particularly significant. So lunchtime is where the action is in downtown Solvang, at least when we did our field work. There was still a significant amount of parking availability in the Veterans Memorial Hall lot, and as well as those private off-street lots on the east side of Alisal Road. And again, just about 45 vehicles were long-term parkers, which was about 14% of the spaces surveyed in our turnover survey.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Did you take a look at how many cars were parked in front of houses down First Street, Second Street, everything else when there wasn't parking available around town?
You mean like parked in the on-street parking spaces in front of houses?
On street in front of houses, yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely heading down First Street, at least as far as Oak. The spaces were pretty full during the lunchtime hour, and then kind of as you get further south from there, it does drop off.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So I'll talk about future conditions briefly. So for our future condition scenario, what we did is we looked at 8 locations that are expected to be developed, redeveloped, reoccupied, or expanded sometime in the near future. That doesn't mean there's submitted development plans for these. We work with city staff to determine, you know, the areas that are currently vacant that are likely to be re-tenanted, as well as lots that may be vacant that, you know, may be developed in the near future. And again, the future assumptions, we worked with city staff on this to determine the types of uses that are likely. Again, there's no specific applications tied to it. There's not somebody proposing a necessarily a 97-room hotel or 16,000 square feet of office, but we're looking at, you know, what we thought would be an appropriate amount that could occur in the near medium term. Next slide, please. So we had two future scenarios, and I will back up 1 second. We also included a 1% ambient growth rate. So that's just assuming also that, you know, parking demand and activity within the downtown will naturally increase by about 1% a year, especially if the economy is healthy. So we had two scenarios. One is if the Copenhagen Drive remains closed to parking in those 60 spaces and becomes a dedicated bicycle, pedestrian, dining space. And the second scenario was just assuming those 60 spaces were returned to the public supply. So what we did here is we did a shared parking analysis for the future uses. So that takes into account that different uses peak during different times of the day, different days of the week, different times of the year. So for example, you know, any new office space is a weekday daytime use. Hotels are an evening and overnight use, and retail and restaurant are a, you know, middle of the day, you know, type of use, lunch and dinner. We assumed that about half of the parking needs would be accommodated on site, so we were assuming that some of the new developments would choose to build parking or a portion of their parking, and some would choose to participate in the city's in lieu fee program. We assumed that, again, that the 1% growth rate over 10 years, and then for this analysis, we assumed that no new public parking was constructed, just to see what would happen to the parking system as it is with that growth. So with the scenario with Copenhagen Drive remaining closed, public parking utilization would reach an overall utilization rate of 100%. This would include Veterans Hall lot also going to close to 100% occupancy. So, you know, with over, you know, the short-term horizon, you could potentially on busy summer weekends see your parking system at 100% occupancy in the public space. In the second scenario with Copenhagen Drive open, we would expect some of those vehicles parked in the Veterans Hall lot and the elementary school lot to kind of trickle back into those spaces. So in the second scenario, there's still a little bit of availability, but on the edges of the tourist-related commercial. So the key findings are basically similar to existing, that, you know, under each scenario, the public parking system will continue to be heavily impacted, high occupancy, low availability, difficulty for patrons and visitors to find parking spaces during peak periods of the day and peak times of the year. And so the other key finding is that we recommend that parking management strategies be considered to help manage existing and future parking demand. So I'll head into that section of our analysis. So we had a lot of recommendations in our report. I'll try to go over the highlights quickly, and you guys, the council can ask questions as needed. So we think it's probably time for the city to consider implementing parking restrictions. There's two main types of parking restrictions. One is time limits. And the second is paid parking. You could do one. You could do both. You know, you could do either or. We do recommend doing both. You could start with time limits, but number 3 there is enforcement. So whichever route you choose, if you choose any, you do need enforcement. So if you are looking at time limits, they would need to be enforced. If you're looking at paid parking, that would also need to be enforced. The reason we recommend this is it would help promote turnover downtown. It would help the city prioritize where people park. So an example is, you know, for time limits could be 3-hour time limits on on-street parking spaces, maybe something like 4 or 5 or 6-hour time limits in some of the public parking lots, and then no time limits in the Veterans Hall lot, in the elementary school lot, and outlying areas. And so the idea there is to try to encourage employees and long-term parkers to park in those outer lots and free up the spaces closer to the core for higher turnover uses for people dining. So instead of having a car sitting in a space in front of a restaurant for 8 hours, that space might serve, 7 or 8 people that were dining or shopping in downtown. Similarly, paid parking does a similar thing as time limits, except it adds the additional choice of whether you want to pay for parking or not pay for parking. So again, we recommend that if paid parking was implemented, it would first occur on street, which are your busiest, most desirable spaces, with other areas remaining free. And then it could be, a pilot program. We've worked with several cities that do a pilot program on, like 60 spaces, for example, for meters, and then decide whether they want to expand it or not. And then the third thing you would need is enforcement, just to enforce the time limits. One of the benefits of, so to speak, of not having a parking management system in place is you don't have to enforce it, so you don't have to spend money to enforce it. So, it is a consideration of, if you're going to go to a parking management system, if you don't have revenue, you'll have expenses with enforcement. There are also potential opportunities for additional parking. We do recommend, trying to increase the utilization of the Veterans Memorial Hall lot, potential public-private parking partnerships. As I mentioned, the parking on the east side of Alisal Road in several of those locations appears to be underutilized, so there could be opportunities for a partnership there to direct employees to some of those lots for long-term parkers. Valet parking is also an option that's used, and then again, a final option would be constructing new parking on city-owned land. Wayfinding, we just recommend that existing signage gets updated with a consistent branding. We know Solvang has a certain look and feel of their signs. We're not recommending to change that. We're just recommending that it be reviewed and made consistent so people can find what they're looking for. We also recommended an advanced parking guidance system. Those are those space displays. And I understand having a big sign in the middle of downtown Solvang saying lot 4, 10 spaces, lot 2 might not fit with the aesthetic. We would recommend that as more an advanced parking guidance, so further down on Mission Street, before they enter the true heart of Solvang, just to give them an idea of what they're in for in terms of parking. We also recommend, we had some recommendations for transportation options regarding the bike lanes and the proposed bike lane on Mission, micromobility, for example, considering shared bikes or e-bikes, and then ride share. You consider doing dedicated parking spaces for Uber and Lyft drop-offs and pickups so that they're not double parking. Next slide, please. So that concludes the main part of my presentation. Hopefully I didn't run too far over my time. I know I kind of skated through some of the recommendations, so I'm available for any questions if you'd like me to discuss anything in more depth.
Are there any questions of the report?
I do have a question. I realize that these might not have been requested in the original scope of work of the study, but I would have loved to see what the fiscal impact is of the different recommendations that you guys have. Is that something that you guys can do? Do you have data collected based on what other cities have done based on following these recommendations?
Yes, that's something we can do. We do have some general information we can share. Just quickly, obviously, building a parking structure is your most expensive option. It would typically cost maybe between $20,000 and $30,000 a space, and that wouldn't even include the fact that for example, on the Veterans Hall lot, we did actually do a layout out there, and you could fit maybe 120 spaces a level, but you have to remember that you're building on an existing parking level, so you have to build double in a sense, just to recoup what you're losing. So the net cost of a structured parking space might be $40,000 or $50,000. Things like parking meters, they tend to be, if you're going, there's lots of different options. You can do the single head meters, you could do the multi-space meters, you could go entirely to pay by cell, which some cities are doing. If you're going with physical meters, the small single meters could be $2,000 to $3,000 a meter, and probably the maintenance and operations cost about $500 a space a year. So we do have kind of information like that I could share and provide additional information. I don't want to take up your whole night.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have some that are addressed to you as well as the council at the same time. From your experience, and I'm not advocating anything, I'm just asking questions. What is the turnaround? Let's say, for example, at the foot of Atterdag, where the entrance is on Oak, that parking lot there, it's kind of quiet. It's not that noticeable, yeah, obviously you'd have to have directions, but say you were to do a double decker there, from your experience, what is the turnaround time? And say you charge for parking there, what is the turnaround to make that pay for itself? Is it 5 years, is it 10 years, is it 15 years?
A lot of that is dependent on the interest rate that the city could get, but probably for structured parking, I would plan on it taking at least 30 years.
Okay.
And another
Cross off.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is if you have a parking structure and charge for parking in the structure and your on-street is still free, everyone's gonna keep circling, looking for the free spaces. So while it's the most expensive to build, it's usually what people are least willing to pay for, the parking structure.
And then, and paid parking in this town is kind of a third rail. There are some people that are very, very, in favor of it, and some that would just never go there, so it's something we've never discussed. I almost wonder, we talk about residents, if you do time parking, like other cities have stickers for residents, where they're exempt from that kind of thing. Is that something that can be addressed, or something
Yeah.
can be thrown into the mix?
Yeah, we don't address it specifically in the report, but I was actually thinking about it on my way here, and, you know, because there are residents downtown, so yeah, you could have a parking permit program for residents.
And is paid parking a big boost to tourist city coffers?
What we like to say is that the goal of the paid parking is to kind of promote parking management and also transportation improvements in the area that the parking is paid for. It's not typically a big revenue generator in terms of, you know, the funding the general fund. The first step would be at least having it pay for the cost of
The meters.
equipment and the enforcement costs, and then, you know, the second step would be using that any additional to fund improvements, you know, within the area, so that people are getting something for what they're paying.
And then lastly, one of your slides has a time frame and will be at 100% of parking. This is more addressed towards the council. Is, for example, during the tour to California, and I see it living down on the Alisal Glen when cars parked down there. We have those 2 lots down there. Is that something to even be considered? If we're anticipating a 4th of July weekend or a Yule Fest, to open up those lots down there and run a shuttle?
Yeah, I think for special events and your largest events, maybe even, you know, 4th of July, if that's big here, it would, you know, make sense to run a limited shuttle for those. And again,
Especially if Copenhagen stays closed.
yeah, especially if it stays closed, and that would probably be, for the amount of times you'll need it, probably more cost effective potentially.
Is that something you guys would want to look at down the road?
Yes,
Sure.
Yeah.
it is, absolutely.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I do have a comment because I saw that the study considers a few private property parking lots. And this is just an observation. These are all not the same. I know that they mentioned the windmill parking structure. I believe that one is open to the public in general. And then it mentions others like the Hotel Cork or the Wyndham timeshare complex. My understanding is that those are not available to the general public, so we can't consider them as available parking. But then again, those are used by the guests of those complexes. So maybe they just cancel themselves out. They're not counted as part of the public parking that is available. They're just available for clients of that particular complex. That's just something to think about.
Any other comments?
Sure. Couple of comments. As you said, the paid parking has some minimal amount of returns, and adds a whole bunch onto the city because we have to have enforcement, we have to do all the equipment, we have to do all the maintenance of the equipment, so on and so forth. I'm also would like your opinion on what would happen if we put paid parking or time limits in the city. How many of those people would just skip it and go park in front of somebody's house on First Street or Second Street?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that with paid parking, you will have parking spillover further south. Time limits as well, and you might even see that already today with, you know, employees parking. That is an issue that can arise. So it is possible that you might need to consider a larger residential parking permit program. You could end up having to, you know, make the streets further south at you deem, out of the tourist commercial area, like permit only.
Yeah, but that still requires enforcement, and we don't have traffic enforcement in the city. So, not directly anyway, parking enforcement.
Yeah.
So that becomes a little bit of an issue. I like your idea of signage. I think we need more signs around the city to tell people where to go, if you'll pardon the expression, to go park. Because I don't think everybody that comes into town knows where all these parking lots are. And I think that's one of our biggest limitations to parking. Also, even with the time limits, you were talking about something like a 3-hour time limit. Do you recall, I don't recall what you said was the percentage of people that parked more than 3 hours?
I'd have to look, because in the presentation we focused on the percent that stayed longer than 6 hours. I think if we dial it back to 3 hours, it's probably maybe 25-30%. It was very heavily concentrated on the short term.
Yeah,
parkers.
that was what I would have assumed. So as a consequence, it really doesn't benefit us much to put time limits on, particularly once again that we have to have a parking enforcement capability, which we don't have today. Excellent, thank you very much.
Are there any mechanical enforcement mechanisms that you can use as opposed to having to hire people to actually monitor the parking facilities and write tickets and that sort of thing? Is there?
Yeah, there are actually, I've seen in Japan, the booths that come up, you pay for your parking and then it goes back down when you leave, but I wouldn't recommend that here. There is there's definitely been, a continued increase in camera-based technologies. The smart meters now that blink, the red when they're not being paid and the green when someone is paid, do make it easier to enforce. I think the problem is, even with remote enforcement, it's very impersonal for someone to get a ticket in the mail after the fact, so you'd still need kind of someone.
Well, they're gonna get it one way or the other if you're doing the enforcement,
Yeah.
so.
But there is license plate recognition that can be used, so then an enforcement vehicle could drive around as opposed to the chalk type.
Yeah. I philosophically just
Yeah,
have a.
and we tend to recommend that the enforcement model be customer service focused, so the goal wouldn't be to ticket, every time over a person. It's really just to, modify the behaviors of most people. 80 to 90% of people will comply just by having it, and even that will help. Even if you don't catch the people that are actually violating it, you'll still see a benefit in terms of the turnover.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may ask one more question. Do you happen to know where the Union Bank is on Mission Drive by Alisal?
Is that the one that is closed right
The
now?
close, yes. It's private property, but I see cars parked in there often, and I know it would have to do with something to do with the owner. But for example, Union Bank, the antique mall that's for lease at front, do towns ever utilize those types of spots temporarily for parking?
Yeah, that's certainly something that can be done. Sometimes.
With the permission of the owner?
Yeah, with the permission of the owner. Usually the biggest sticking point is, the insurance. We see, and this isn't with closed uses, but in the city of San Clemente, there's some office uses, and the city has gotten an agreement with them that their valet program parks vehicles in those uses on nights and at weekends. And I think the city pays maintenance costs and, some of the insurance liability.
Something to think about. Thank you.
Any other questions? I just had a couple. On the 109 spaces at the Veterans, where did that go? Did it go up around the top and back over by the senior center, or was it just north of the hall and then everything on the west of it?
Yeah, it was everything adjacent to the hall and over.
So basically the LA.
Yeah.
And then I know because this was during COVID, there was no special events there at the Veterans Hall. So while we're trying to say it's underutilized, the reality is that any person that rents the hall, that parking lot becomes theirs. And it's, we're hoping that we're going to be able to rent it out and start getting some revenue that way, and that would be a big part of actually, that'd be a significant loss of parking, and especially on the weekends, Friday nights, Saturday nights, when typically those the hall is actually being rented. I know once we get that thing rolling, we'll have to see how that goes. Did anybody mention lot 72 on the bottom third where we have special events? We've parked upwards of 400 cars at one time on that lot, and I'm just wondering if there's any possibilities of, I mean, not necessarily paving it. Maybe Matt would be better to ask this, but just do a DG, you know, get it nice and clean.
But then you've
Without
got
the
Village
potholes.
question to deal with, don't you?
Well, I'm not, you know, I mean, it's set up for parking now for all special events that were grandfathered in. Yeah, and they utilize that, but it's really only the bottom third. And, you know, I mean, it could always just be the overflow parking, but it was 350 to 400 cars that we parked there
Yeah.
during, you know, SCORE, during Amgen, and that could be something just minimal cost to actually put, I mean, DG, I know has a cost to it, but certainly would be a lot less expensive to do something there, even if it's not fully paved.
So Mayor Yerg, excuse me, are you referring to the bottom part?
Yeah, the section where we always used.
Down the hill, the bottom of the hill, by our well?
No,
Or- No, at the top?
no,
Okay.
right off of Alisal Mesa, so
Sure,
you go straight
sure.
up the little ramp there.
Right.
That
right.
whole section right there.
Yeah,
If it
so-
was more DG, which would be more of a natural look as opposed to asphalt and medians and everything there.
Sure, to answer your question, well, you have a few questions. For starters, that was not considered in the parking study that was done, that Jeff's firm undertook. The reason for that is because it's, in the past, it had only been utilized periodically during certain special events. And the event holder would need to coordinate with the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation, who holds the lease.
Right.
And, but we have developed a little map that delineates the southerly third of that upper part that can be used for parking. So, I believe the former city manager met with them, or I'm not exactly sure who, but, they worked out, you know, okay, this is the area that you could have public parking during special events. And they, have a fee now, that they charge someone that wants to use that area, and they monitor it to make sure that, you know, they set up cones and stuff to make sure people don't go outside of that area. But as Jeff mentioned, with regarding to these other public parking lots, you could enter into a public-private partnership and have an agreement for, you know, whatever they're willing to agree to, and whatever compensation type of thing. You know, they could have somebody in charge, you know, a couple dollars per car for the day. But I think it would really only be beneficial or useful during big special events where you got a lot more cars than normal, and people then, you know, are kind of more desperate for a parking space and would actually venture. And you could have signage, you know, as Councilmember Infante was saying, you know, wayfinding and direct people down that way for the event. But so that is totally doable, but it'd be kind of up to what they would be willing to allow and agree with.
Okay. It would just be nice because we actually own it as a city.
Yeah.
Even though the historical trust is in charge of that lease, but, all right. Yeah, I was thinking the same lot over there at Union Bank, that'd be a good one to try to utilize if we could, right there in the main, so. That's all I have for right now. Any other questions? I'll take it out to public comment on this right now. And I do have a speaker slip from Jennifer Sony.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I read your report. Thank you for having me this evening. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all once again and have the time to address the parking situation. And I'm just going to read this briefly so it'll take less time. And I've reviewed the report and the assessment, which is really not surprising. Whether we choose to address the amount of parking spaces that are not in use in Copenhagen are on Mission or auxiliary streets. The same conclusion really is without question. And I've seen it over the past 17 years that I've had a business here in downtown on Copenhagen. We've been maxed out, whether it's been on the weekends or on private events. Generally, it doesn't hold true during the week. Weekdays, normally we can be with it's parking spaces that sit empty, whether they're in the auxiliary lots or on the street. Therefore, I would really question whether we wanted to meter those, just in a sidebar on that. So, whether stating that Copenhagen is the problem, whether we keep it open, whether we keep it closed, I view that as really an illogical assessment of the parking problem that we are engaging on in Sylvain. As far as I look, that there's several options that merit consideration, whether it be the Veterans Hall lot or utilizing the two major city lots. If we even look at Veterans Hall, I think this was something we addressed with the previous city council, and which even Disneyland does. They have a trolley. So on people that are saying it's too far to walk, it's inconvenient, if you have the signage that you are addressing and some type of parking situation in each of those locations along with a trolley, other than the horse-drawn trolley, we could have something that could be every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes. Trolley came along and did servicing to each of the parking structures that are outside the boundary of normal walking capacity would be one element. So the other thing is where people do look for parking and they seem to be frustrated. Maybe there's this parking structure, even though what was addressed, that it is a little bit expensive, to say the least. On being a resident also up in Luis Obispo County, I've seen the structures that have been in San Luis Obispo where they've taken care of a lot of their parking, not to mention in Santa Barbara County, what downtown Santa Barbara's done. They've utilized like the lots that are downtown off Copenhagen. Those have been metered, as well as if you chose to do high-rise structures and you integrated the parking structure with having small businesses the opportunity to have businesses on those structures and then make them where they're part of the Danish motif. I see that as another element where you could have piggyback maybe up to 3-4 levels of parking. I don't see any other way around it, personally. The other thing in closing, and I know I'm over, this just came out, which I think really addresses our statement on where it's talking about how Santa Barbara has been reviewed, how the city, by like the closure of Copenhagen, they closed State Street. They not only took care of the city's needs, but they kept small business intact. And I think that's what we have done. And as a result, I'm standing here today based on your compassion to me as a business and what the city did. And I think this is addressing what each and every one of us are our concerns. And I have a copy for each of you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Soni.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And bless you. There you go. Thank you.
And then Dennis Beebe, speaker slip.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I did read the study, and I'm always looking for omissions. They're kind of hard to find. So I acted as a tourist today, and I decided to try to find a parking lot. So I came in from the west. I didn't try it from the east. And the first sign I saw was not very visible on the corner of 5th Street and Mission. saying parking to the right. So I went to the right, and then there was no more signs till I got to Oak, and that sign was obscured by the hedge. The sign was barely visible, the arrow was not visible. I suggest, in addition to considering larger signs, I endorse your consultant's recommendations, that the signs be tailored for this Danish capital of America, make them Danish. If you look at these modern signs you're using now, something I would see in a Word template. So,
Right.
but the first thing to do is take a look at all your signs, see if they're really helping, and help those people find the limited parking we've got. I note the study didn't look at remote lots and shuttles, but, you know, in my opinion, given traffic, which you will be wrestling with too, the two are related, it would be nice to bleed the traffic off before it gets enmeshed in the middle of town looking for a parking lot. The Fifth Street turnoff can lead to both the Copenhagen lot and the lot accessible off Oak. Of course, you can't get to the Copenhagen lot because you blocked off that little piece of Copenhagen, but that would be easily done. It's within your power. So, you know, you make it easy and you try to beat people off, and that makes the bank parking lot a possible near-term option where you bleed people off before they even get to Olisau. And that brings me to the lots that are available. That lot is the change down, but no one's using it because there's no signage. It is private. But a phone call. The Vets Hall parking lot and the Solvang Elementary parking lot. I went to the website thinking, hey, I'm a tourist. I'll find out where the parking lots are in Solvang. Make it a lot easier to find them. There's only 3 lots listed, and those 2 are not listed. And the windmill lot isn't listed. So, you know, my suggestion is you make a quick, low-budget change and upgrade your website so people can find the parking more easily. I think that's about all my notes, but... Oh, yes, I forgot. I'm totally against any controls over this parking, money or time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And Hans? Deuce. Mr. Deuce. Your time's up.
Don't start the clock until I get up there. He's just messing with you.
It's a calendar now. Go to the clock when we start talking.
I've just been sitting too long, you know?
Thank you for coming down and being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Mayor, and look, I even remembered this time, because I saw the picture of it in the door. I thought you were gonna tell me I gotta put it on. Why didn't you write bigger so I didn't have to bring it in? Anyway, I'm Hans Deuce, I'm from Santa Maria. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff. Just a quick history on parking in Solvang. Parking lots started in the early mid-60s. I'm not exactly sure when, but a gentleman by the name of Chris Faursey, who was one of the part of the family was original here in 1911. He was on the SMID board. Whether it was his push for parking lots that got him on the SMID board, or he was already there and came up with it, I don't know. I wasn't really that tuned into city politics in the early 60s, even though I was riding my bike all over downtown. It wasn't, these parking lots weren't a lot of forward thinking. It was trying to catch up. We were having Danish days at that time with 50 to 60,000 people coming in. I remember as a Boy Scout, we parked cars in the Mission Meadow on the other side, in the Vets Hall, down Copenhagen, any place where we could shove a car during that weekend. And that went on for several years. So that's kind of the history of it. These lots have served us well, I think, over the years. You know, we discuss signage. When that first came up, it was kind of like deja vu. I remember that, sitting up there listening to the same thing, that we got to have better signage to figure out where the parking lots are. That was probably 8 years ago. I don't know. One of the things I want to talk about, though, is the importance of the locals, the local trade. And by that, I don't mean just Solvang, I mean the San Ynez Valley. They're the ones during the off-season that keeps the town lights on, rent's paid. So when you make decisions on limiting parking, if you choose to, if you make decisions on paid parking, keep that in mind. We're the ones that come in often and spend money often. Even though there's only, you know, a few thousand of us, we can't offset completely the money that 1.5 million tourists come in, but per individual, the local over a 12-month period is going to spend a whole lot more money than the visitor. So just keep that in mind. I know I'm out of time. I can see the red. How about something special for handicap? I'm becoming very well aware of that, and I limit where I can go based on how close I can drive. It's a pain to the places I want to go on Copenhagen, but I can't get close enough to them. I don't want to walk a couple blocks. Now, I do know the back streets very well. I know where there's little parking spots. I can know how to make little parking spots. But there are a lot of people that don't. So I've got a lot more. We can talk about it someday over a cup of coffee someday. But anyway, it's a pleasure being here. Good seeing everybody. Glad we can see the expression on your face and your smiles. You know, we've really missed that over the last however many months, 15, whatever. Good to see everybody smile. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Hans.
Thank you.
I have no other speaker slips. Are there any wishing to speak on this item that did not submit one? And bringing it back to looking for anybody on Zoom, I only see the one. So, are there any final questions or comments? I think there's no motion, it's just a presentation.
There's no motion, so I think what we take away is that there was definitely some support for signage going forward.
Yes.
Are we going to bring the subject up on a future agenda so that we can discuss and make some decisions?
Right, so today was kind of a broad overview. You can definitely direct us to come back with specific items and specific recommendations if you give us some guidance today as to what to continue to work on and return with. That's the type of direction that we are looking for today.
I would like to propose that you bring that, staff does give us some recommendations, brings it back and let us discuss that, particularly with regard to the signage. I think I want to address the rest of it.
And Union Bank, and what do you think?
Well, I think Union Bank, it's just a matter of trying to get a hold of it.
You can't,
I've
know.
tried.
it's a trust and
They
they're
get
not,
really
Torrance,
difficult.
they don't respond to anybody.
They don't
right
talk to
now.
anybody.
Yeah, it's really hard to get hold of them.
Well, it's just
But it's-
park there.
Everybody's parking there anyway.
If the chain's down, park. But same with the antique mall, and I do wanna get those signs cleaned up and more visible. If they are blocked by anything, let's get maintenance out there and take a look at those. But also bring up the shuttle thing too, during peak
Oh,
weekends.
right, the shuttle, yes, that's a
And we'll
great idea.
discuss that as well.
Yes, please.
I had mentioned that with Sal when he was talking about the electric shuttles would be actually still filling the Danish motif, and it'd be kind of something where you could get 8, 10, 12 at a time.
Yeah.
And maybe just have it be down at Peterson's. It'd be nice to get down at the, on, by the
village.
Gill Flat.
People
Down there and bring them right up, and it, as Dennis was saying, getting people off of Mission before they come into town to stack it up and park, in some of those.
Let's make Fjord go through.
But at the website too, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Oh,
Easy change.
And
Yeah.
the website. Yes,
Expand
that's
the
great.
website.
Well, our website's
Yeah.
getting updated, that we got a lot
That's
to
a
do with that
separate deal.
website.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
we'll come back
definitely
with
that would be something.
some recommendations on signage, use of shuttles, and continue to work with Lot 72 for large special events. And we'll take a look at our website and better communication there. I do not hear any support for us to continue to work on options to create paid parking or limited parking options at this point.
No,
I
not for
don't
me.
think so right now.
I would ask a question of our attorney, though. If, we're talking about the bank building on the corner that is owned by somebody else, if a tourist parks there, hurts themselves, who's liable?
Well, if it's not city property, I don't think the city's gonna have
Mike?
Your
Do you
microphone.
have a mic?
And
If it's not city property, I don't think the city's gonna have anything to do with it. So the person might sue the property owner, but then they're not supposed to be there, so they'll have to work it out between
I
themselves.
don't think there's a sign that says no parking on it.
no, there isn't, and that chain is not there.
And the chain's gone, it has been for a while. So I don't know the answer to that, but
Yeah, but my point is, I don't think it's the city's issue, because it's not our property.
Good.
Yeah.
and that would be true also of the antique store that's
Yeah, if it's,
not, well, we know the owner, we can get hold of that owner.
Yeah.
yeah, so if the city's not, leasing it for a parking lot, and it's just a private lot, and somebody chooses to park there, that's between that person parking and the property owner for whatever happens.
Fair enough.
But if we decide to pursue that and get an agreement and use it as a public parking lot, that would change the equation.
I think Village Collection would be another one, because there's, most of those businesses that are there are not open on the weekends. It'd be a really nice place to be right down there on Alisal. And there's quite a significant amount of parking spaces.
Does anybody know what the owners are asking for that corner lot?
Which one?
The one that's for sale at the bank?
I don't know.
But apparently they're not budging, because I know they've had some counters and they're saying no.
Yeah, they've been approached.
But do we know what that
No.
price is?
I'm sure a phone call tomorrow, we could figure that out. You wanna buy it?
I don't.
I would caution the council that that's getting a little off the agenda topic.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some ADA parking added. I think I had mentioned it way back when.
That's a great idea.
On the Alisal side, right there by Rasmussen's, we have the only 15-minute parking next to a long red curb going north of Copenhagen. So on the west side of Alisal, along there could be at least a half a dozen ADA just handicap right there that's red right now and really would not impact any
Anything else?
traffic.
We've talked about that before, about opening that up to parking, period, because you can't
Right.
turn right on Copenhagen. So I don't know where we last left that, but
Yeah.
that's even better, I would say, paint it blue instead of green, or
Instead of
just
green, yeah.
the regular.
Just a thought there, but it would get some handicap right downtown. It'd be nice to have that.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. We
so
can
maybe-
consider that, and also
This-
public-private
But is there
partnerships.
handicap parking on main streets where you're parking parallel to the street? 'Cause if you're getting out on the curbside, I don't see a lot of handicap parking parallel to a street.
I think,
Did you notice that in your study? I don't know of only a couple that are on First as far as ADA. that have
Handicap parking.
a wide enough area for.
Yeah,
Matt, you want to come up?
so, so I think, converting some of the red curbed area on Alsau Road to parking, is a good idea. However, I would have to look at it more closely, but I don't believe there's gonna be enough room. Cause you need like a 9-foot space, and then I think it's
Yeah.
5 or 6 feet in addition to that.
And you have the planners.
Oh, for the handicap, okay.
Well, yeah, and then you do need to have ADA accessible ramp, up onto the sidewalk, so we'd have to look at the proximity of like the alley or the, you know, where it would be to the corner, and maybe the cost of, adding a ramp would, have to be incurred.
Maybe a little closer down to where Fredericks is, because then
Right, it's a little wider there.
it's a lot wider right
Yeah.
there. Maybe you get a couple of diagonals
Yeah,
in there.
Well, I'm making notes and we'll look at that, yeah.
So we have anyone for the next meeting?
Miss Sony, I know you had another comment, but if you come up here so everyone can hear it.
Surely.
Do you want to reopen the public comment?
Yes, I'm gonna reopen public comment.
This came to my mind when you were speaking about handicap accessibility on Copenhagen and talking about a shuttle, because on having the business there in such a wide thoroughfare, which I still can't understand why you couldn't have a one-way on that area of Copenhagen, which would utilize a thoroughfare going through Copenhagen. But beyond that, if you're integrating a shuttle service from that might have difficulty having accessibility to Copenhagen, it seems that shuttle service could go down Copenhagen right in the center, because you would not be affecting any of the restaurants, or even if you were having farmers market down the center, and it would give people that did have handicap special consideration, that they could then be at some of the areas that where their limitations might keep them from going based on it being closed.
And I know one of the trolleys has that handicap availability.
Yeah.
Right.
And being
so-
electric, that
Right.
really is nice to have
Really,
that
yeah.
option.
So that was something that came to my mind, where it would benefit all, and particularly even families with small children.
Because the Ruiz truck drives down Copenhagen when they're picking up the trash.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's food for thought for the next.
Is that enough notes there?
Yes, thank you. We have our direction. We'll come back to you with all
I'll
of
close
those
back,
recommendations.
Close public comment now. I think that's our last direction, and we'll move on to item 6.
yeah, item 6.
Okay. Item number 6 is the fiscal year 2021-22 budget adoption. The recommendations for today are to review the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 supplemental budget for operating programs and capital improvement program, to adopt resolution amending the appropriation limit for fiscal year 21-22, and to adopt the resolution adopting fiscal year 21-22 budget for both operating and capital improvement program. So tonight's
Madam City
presentation.
Manager, may I interrupt? And
Of
I didn't
course.
realize what time it was, and I'd like to, if we could, just take a 5-minute break before we get started on the budget.
Absolutely, thank you for that.
Thank you. We call 8:03, we'll be back at 8:08. at 8:10. Madam Chair, sorry for that interruption.
Absolutely. So, item number 6 is the fiscal year 2021-22 budget adoption. The recommendations are, once again, to review the proposed budget, to adopt a resolution amending the appropriation limit for the fiscal year 21-22, and to adopt a resolution adopting the fiscal year 21-22 budget. If we can have the slide, please. Tonight's presentation structure is going to be as follows, just so you know what to expect as we go along. You'll first receive the proposed fiscal year 21-22 budget, which will consist of a brief discussion of the budget document structure, the budget development process, budget framework, and existing conditions. We'll take a look at the strategic goals that this budget was framed upon, and take a look at the budget highlights. I'll keep it at summary type of overview for you today, because you have had a number of opportunities to look into these budget matters over the past 6 months. Then we'll have the council comments. You can, at this point, still make any changes you would like to make, and those can be incorporated into the budget adoption that would be in front of you later with this item. So first, would like to give a little bit of a focus to the budget document. If you have had a chance to review some of the prior year's budget documents, you will notice that we have definitely given it some effort to give it a lot more of a story to the numbers, and actually explain how our organization is structured, explain the policies and the goals that this budget is framed on. So the new structure of the budget is actually in alignment with recommendations from the Government Fiscal Officers Association, which is a nationwide organization that reviews budgets from different municipalities so across the nation and gives them awards. And really the purpose of that program is to ensure that as we present budgets for your review and for the community, that folks are able to interpret how we operate, what our operating structure is, and what the dollars are being allocated for. So the budget document is structured with an introduction that gives the budget highlights, budget overview, strategic vision and strategies, statistical section about the city of Solvang, and financial policies. We then have the information on 5-year forecasts, which gives you the longer-term financial picture where you can make decisions about the long-term revenues meeting the expenditures and make those decisions. And then we have more detailed summaries, revenue and expenditure by fund, which is a financial section of the report that tells you by each fund. And we have, once again, 4 major operating funds, which is the general fund. We have water and wastewater funds that are specific to those functions. And we also have the transit fund. The rest of the funds are really there for accounting purposes. After the revenue and expenditure by fund financial summaries, you have the department program summaries. The department program summaries explain the accomplishments that each department has accomplished over the past year, and also the goals and accomplishments that we will be working on during fiscal year 21-22 as proposed. We also added some performance measures just to begin that program, so that over time we can tell, depending on the funding structure, how we are doing in terms of our performance. And it also includes the organization charts and descriptions for each department and each program within that department. After that, we have expenditures by department, program, and fund. And just to mention on that, it's the way that the system for financial system was structured when the system was implemented in 2012 doesn't exactly flow the new organizational chart. So you will find it a little bit more challenging to maneuver between the written organizational structure and those financial details, but that's an additional effort to restructure the accounting chart of accounts to make it aligned with the new organizational structure if you adopt that today. And then, of course, we have our capital improvement program as well, which is aligned with the operating budget as it's being proposed. So the budget development process, once again, to remind everybody that you have had a number of public meetings where you reviewed these different areas. You looked at the forecast for the major operating funds, once again, so that you have an understanding of how we are looking within those funds structurally in terms of the revenues meeting the expenditures on an ongoing basis. We looked in detail into all of the operating programs and what is being proposed for the next year, as well as the details for the capital improvement program. We are on a 2-year plan development, and we are in the second year of the financial plan. So as I've mentioned before, currently we are engaging with the community with the general plan update, which will be completed by the time you consider the next 2-year financial plan development. And that public input and the long-term vision guiding principles will be very useful for establishing and having the discussions in public input for the goals that would be then programmed with the next 2-year financial plan. So normally we would start the process with fiscal forecast, the community outreach, and internal budget review. Then you review all of that input, and we're here now today at the final step of the budget adoption. So budget framework and existing conditions, is the theme that I've been talking about with this particular budget, is that it's a path of hope to stability. We are definitely focused on economic recovery right now. We are finally in full swing of having lifted all of the tiered restrictions, and we'll be focusing, of course, on our economic engine, which is tourism for the city of Solvang. We are focused also within this budget and the goals on rebuilding the city's internal organization structure post-COVID-19 and rebuilding our operating programs and increasing the staff levels to meet the new demands under a fully functioning economy. We are also focusing our capital improvement program on investment in infrastructure over time. We should, of course, be mindful of the existing challenges that we are facing with this financial plan and going forward, which will be the uncertainty of stable economic recovery. We are doing great, as you have heard here in Solvang. Our revenues are coming in very well right now for both sales tax and transit occupancy tax, which constitute about 65% of all general fund revenues. The county is doing well as well. We just heard about the Measure A, and that revenue is also recovering rather well. So we'll continue to monitor our progress as the city of Solvang in comparison to our surrounding areas and see how we do as we also focus our funding on marketing expenditures. But there is also, of course, the national economy and the state economy, and with a shock like COVID-19 and the closures of the economy and the shutdowns, there's still a lot of uncertainty as to how economy overall might react and recover from that. We do have the pressure of increasing costs for law enforcement and, frankly, County of Santa Barbara services overall. So we'll continue to have to talk about that, and that creates pressure on our costs. We also have the continuing risk of continuing increases on the pension costs from CalPERS. Of course, we're dealing with the drought conditions, which drive our prices and the cost of our water up, as we are currently faced with searching for additional water purchases to meet our demand. We receive about half of our water from our local well sources, while we source at least another half from the state. And of course, we have the issue of imbalanced water and wastewater fund structures, to where our current fees for services do not actually cover ongoing expenditures for those services. And that's not to mention continuing need to invest in infrastructure. So turning over to budget highlights, as I presented before with the preliminary budget, what you are looking at here is that citywide overall, our sources and uses, we will draw on about $4.5 million from our fund balances. A lot of that, or a good portion of that, of course, has to do with the LSO project and a number of other capital improvement program projects. On the general fund, you will see there that if we take into consideration all of the expenditures and revenues for the general fund, because we invest in some of the capital improvement program funding from the general fund, we will be also drawing about $666,000 from unreserved fund balance for the general fund. This is just a page, and I did add agenda page number 138 that shows the capital improvement program as far as where the funding for that program comes from. So you will see here that there's some of these funds that are just there for specific purposes, such as the Measure A funds and impact funds, gas funds, that have to be separated for accounting purposes and are used for specific purposes as well.
If I may, on page 138, you list operating expenses, and then it has a sentence that says the table below shows the anticipated capital improvement expenses, but the table below shows capital funding. That's what the title is that right?
So on page 48, we have the following chart shows a breakdown of the capital improvement program expenditures, which is the pie chart. And then the table below shows the capital improvement. It's both expenses and funding, yes, but it's basically expenses by fund. So those specific funds fund those expenditures.
Okay, so that's where I was confused, because the title of the table says capital improvement program funding by fund. So, but it's expenses by fund.
It's both. It really is both. Well, the fund. So there's expenditures within each fund, and it's that fund that funds those expenditures. But I'm happy to work on clarifying that table language.
Fair enough. Okay, I trying to read this is a little difficult when you come into things like that. Okay, sorry, continue, please.
Okay, so then on page 148 of the agenda, once again, you see this organizational chart. I showed this to you during the preliminary budget. You did not give any alternative directions, so this is not changed. Once again, the changes that are taking place is that in administration department, there is, compared to the current fiscal year 2021, there is an addition of the city clerk department or city clerk position. There is also an addition or restructure of the recreation side of operations to where we are creating a recreation supervisory role. And then we are also adding a recreation coordinator and a part-time special events contract help. We are also adding a part-time position for human resources manager. And in the planning side of operations, we are looking at both filling the planning assistant position, which you approved late this fiscal year, and adding a planning supervisor, which I may need to reclass as far as the naming of the position as a planning manager in order to distinguish between some of the positions that fall under the MOU agreement versus this position would actually be replacing the planning director position that used to exist. Can you bring up the slide?
The changes?
Yes.
Well, we don't want to talk about typos. Hopefully the new agenda software has a spell checker. Well, you've got library misspelled 3 times in a row as library. But anyway, that's another point. Thank you.
I actually have one quick question too, if I may.
Of course.
On page 137, general fund, the grant revenue,
Mm-hmm.
is that the one-time shot when the feds doled out money from responsible states and gave it to states like California?
Correct.
That
So
sent
about
down to us.
1.3 million of that is that American Rescue Plan funding. The rest of that is primarily the COPS funds that we receive from the
Okay, so
state
this is a
for law
one-time-
enforcement.
That 1.4 million, of 1.3 of it's a one-time shot.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Can I, oops, I do have it on. If I may, back on page 146, you've got a year-to-year comparison of operating contracts. Are you there yet?
I was not planning to dive into that in detail, but
Well,
I'm
I have
happy to
only
pull
one
it up.
quick- I have one or two quick questions. What is traffic counts? We're paying somebody to count traffic?
Correct. Yes.
Why?
It's Matt. Would you like to come up and explain how that works?
Sure. Periodically, we do traffic counts at the major intersections in the city. And so that's needed for a variety of reasons. So whenever SBCAG or the county are doing transportation studies and they want to see what changes are happening over time, and also occasionally we do need that information if we're going to apply for grant funding to show what changes are happening. And a lot of times they'll do pedestrian and bicycle counts along with that, but we typically do it every other year.
Thank you. And also on that chart, it shows tree management, and then in another spot, it has street tree management. That's two different contracts totaling over 200,000?
That is, yes, those are broken out because of just the accounting structure and how it's been programmed over the years.
So there's a difference between trees and street trees.
Well, I think I'd have to look at it specifically if you want to.
It's not,
look at
no, as long as
But
you're.
the street trees, obviously, that's pretty straightforward. But there's also another category for parks, all the trees in the city parks, and then
Okay.
and then sometimes in the budget there are line items that were used historically in the past, and that we've changed the description or the account number for various reasons for.
To confuse city council members. It's perfect.
And so you'll see a line that actually no longer used, but typically that'll have a zero budget on those type of things, but.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, that tree management, there's a lot of trees that went down in HCA. There's a lot of stuff over there, as opposed to the street trees.
would have been all one contract,
Yeah,
but apparently not. Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, so Public Works operating changes. We have, as I've discussed before during the preliminary budget review, the proposal is to break the current Public Works department, which houses maintenance, water, wastewater, all under one department head, into two departments. So the changes for the Public Works Department is that with the creation of the Utilities Department, the revised Public Works Director position will be able to provide greater support and direction to the city's public works needs. The Parks and Maintenance Division will continue to be merged under the oversight of the Public Works Director, similar to the promotional change in Water Division. Maintenance lead and Parks lead positions will be established. And for the Utilities Department, we would be
Put that back up on the screen. Can you take it back up? Thank you.
Okay, so that's all I had for the Public Works Department itself. Essentially, the Utilities Department will become its own, and the major changes in the Public Works is that there would be just the Public Works Director. We would be recommending keeping and backfilling the assistant engineer. So either the Public Works Director or the assistant engineer could be the city engineer. And then the additional changes that occur there is that because the division of maintenance has been merged under Public Works, that used to be partially under Public Works and partially under Parks. It's all now one division, which actually has functioned that way during COVID-19, but what we are proposing is to refine their workload, is creating a maintenance lead position, so it's a slight promotion, and then also a parks lead position, so that functionally under the maintenance supervisor you would have an employee that's the lead for ensuring everything in parks gets done, and then another employee who ensures that everything under maintenance gets done. The transit would remain under Public Works, and the utilities functions will be transitioned to the utilities department. So under utilities, we would then be creating a brand new utilities department head, utilities director position. That position will be overseeing the major operations of water and wastewater. There is a supervisor in each one of those positions. We have had historically a lead wastewater operator. So the proposition here is that we would also create a lead water operator. That way, if the supervisor goes on vacation or is not available, there's another position that's kind of second in command and can step up rather than the department head having to step down to fill those duties. There's also a lot more focus on kind of developing these programs, as regulations from the state have changed a lot over the years. So this position would be definitely focused on the very significant upgrade that we are talking about for the wastewater treatment plant. There's also the Groundwater Sustainability Act that is a lot more focused now. There's continued the stormwater engagement, and of course working on all of the water needs in terms of supply and also infrastructure, including our well program here at the city. Another focus area for this position, working along with finance and administration, will be working on the update of the water and wastewater fee study, which you approved within this fiscal year of the contract, but the workload will really happen in the next fiscal year. So that is the recommendations for the utilities department. And another recommendation here is that we will be looking to bring back the collection system operator position, which would then enable this division to fully service the collection system every year on an ongoing basis. Moving on, unless you have any questions on organizational structure, which may be a good time to pause. If not, I can keep going with these are the agency grants recommendations. So we have had, based on the policy that you had previously approved to focus on humanitarian services, these were the applications. Solon Senior Center for $55,000 was the ask. Scattered or Get Home for $20,000. Buellton Senior Center $10,000, and Fruit and Veggie Rescue, which was a new request compared to last year, for $10,000. Now the Everhoy Museum History of Art is under existing contract, funded at $35,000 a year, and that is something that we can continue to fund through the contract. It's in the second year of its contract right now already.
I would like to talk about an agency that I think belongs in there from the standpoint of the grants recommendations and the issue of seniors, and I mentioned it before, it's the Therapeutic Writing Center that we have not funded. They have a seniors program and are working currently with the Therapeutic Writing Center and the Weekly Veterans Program, and they're working with the other senior programs that have already been funded. And I'd like to see that if we could appropriate $5,000 for that particular program. To me, it falls under the seniors issues, And I think it was just not brought up in the last meetings, or I brought it up at one meeting, but it wasn't put in originally.
So that is something that you can comment on now, or at the end as we go through this presentation, you can make any comments or changes that you would like to make.
Wouldn't that have to open up to public discussion if you're making an individual request like that? Or can we just add it to this budget?
Technically,
It'd be a separate issue, wouldn't it?
technically you can add it to the budget.
Okay.
It's within your discretion.
Right.
It's just about, obviously you had previously looked into the policy and approved it as focusing on humanitarian programs with focus on senior services. Then there was an application process opened where certain organizations applied. This particular organization did not apply. I can finish the presentation and then return back for any changes that you would like to make. So this slide shows sort of a summary of the essence that the programs were formed around. We call it the strategic goals. It is one of the elements that GFOA wants to see in terms of a budgetary document. So to summarize this for this particular fiscal year, and once again, with the next 2-year financial plan development, you will have an opportunity to have more robust discussions with the community and develop strategic goals for the next financial plan. But the programs are really focused around fostering the tourism industry and promoting Solvang's unique character as travel destination. Continue to develop Solvang's vision and guiding principles for the next 20 years through the comprehensive general plan update with significant outreach for community input. To promote desired change through planning and design as we receive that input and move forward with the general plan update. To foster local economic development and provide a key support role to the business community during the recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. To ensure fiscal sustainability through long-range planning, economic development, and timely investment in infrastructure. Be the desired place to live, work, and play by promoting programs supporting health and recreation, housing supply, and multimodal transportation. Provide the community with safe and reliable water. Maintain an authentically appealing image throughout the city. And to foster organizational effectiveness by maintaining healthy, highly qualified personnel and utilization of modern technologies. So once again, the recommendations today are to review the proposed budget, to adopt the resolution amending the appropriation limit, which is a requirement from the state, and then to adopt a resolution adopting the fiscal year 21-22 budget. Once again, you can incorporate any changes it's all within your discretion to this proposed budget. We do need, our current budget expires on June 30, so this establishes the operating programs and our ability to continue to make expenditures starting July 1.
Are there any questions of the staff report? I had a couple, if no one else wants to go. I just, heading back to, I guess it would be the page 148. The way we're gonna split off the public works and utilities, and then underneath public works, we have, I always think of names of people that work, so just position-wise, is what you have under the maintenance supervisor incorporating the lead maintenance worker, maintenance 1 and 2, lead part and 1 there. Is that all that we have right now? In theory, I know that we're having some other issues, but just personnel-wise, is that where we need to be? Or I know we brought back the parks maintenance worker 1.
Correct.
From one of the terminated positions, but is the 4 that are there on the maintenance side, are those, we have those all filled right now?
We have those all filled currently, yes. We have 1 vacancy that we advertised for and we are ready to fill as soon as we are able to roll out this overall reorganization.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask about the janitorial contract. Is the contract that was on, I guess it was page 146, this fiscal year, we're showing it at 130, and that's, I'm assuming, us adding in the additional time and hours and extra pickups that we did kind of during the Christmas
Correct.
time when everything was really
Yes.
shut down. It's going up another $21,000. Is that, are the maintenance guys, which what I remember from way past at 6 o'clock or 5:30 a.m. when they're coming in, they're doing all of the pickup of all the trash. They were doing a lot of that during the day. Is that strictly now only going to be through the janitorial contract?
Currently, that's how it operates, and that's how it's proposed in the budget, that the restroom cleaning and the trash pickup would remain at the current levels through the janitorial or through this contract.
Okay, so it went up that much.
Yes, that
And
was
that's
the
5
additions, yeah.
5 pickups daily, or just on the weekend,
I
and
think this is the weekend that
and
was
4 during the week?
Yeah, I'd have to double check, but I think that is correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it's, I think one more time on a weekend than during the week.
Okay. I'm just wondering if we actually need to have that much now that we've opened up. We don't have the trash problem like we did back, because it's not just serving, takeout now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was the whole premise of us, actually, why I brought that up back in December. And I'm just wondering if we could maybe go back down to the levels, what it was pre-COVID somewhat, because we don't have that trash issue, especially with all of the receptacles that are out there now. I don't know if we need to have the pickups like we were, because people can dine in. That wasn't available back in December. And so everything was packaged and everything was just dumped wherever it could go. And I think it could be, maybe brought back just a little bit from what it was, Matt,
Yeah, no, that's excellent idea. What I would suggest is, we're actually looking at the possibility of, utilizing a different contractor for the trash, actual trash pickup that we do. And if we've just been getting proposals from a new company that contacted us just a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
But it looks like that might save the city some money. But what we can do is just basically enter into a contract and then monitor that and cut back as needed. So we can really focus on that to try to save as much money as possible. I think initially we would want to hold it the same, and then we can monitor that. The maintenance supervisor can monitor that, and they're the ones who oversee that contract. But and then cut it back accordingly. So.
Okay. Because I was just thinking if we could save $20,000, that could give us a little bit of money for the therapeutic riding center. Right
And
there.
you can
I have a
definitely reallocate $5,000 or $20,000
Yeah.
of that.
Is that contract with Reason Atwell?
I'm not sure.
Yes.
It's not a 6-month contract or anything like that we signed.
I don't know what.
We have a multi-year contract with him for the janitorial services.
Other stuff, correct.
But then we did amendments to add all these different various things.
Right.
And those can be amended.
Yes,
Thank
exactly.
you.
Yeah, and we would just give them a 30-day notice, and and that is per the contract. It allows for just give them a 30-day
Great.
notice, and we can make any adjustments.
Okay.
One other question, if I may. Looking at that same chart, so we've got a contract that lists building, and it says for the 2019, 20, and 2021 includes code enforcement. It does not state that for 21, 22. Did we lose code enforcement out of that contract?
So correct, it's been restructured. Building services now do not include code enforcement. Code enforcement is its own separate contract, currently reporting to administration.
Thank you.
That's all I had. Thank you. Any other questions of the staff report? Is there any suggestions? Maybe bringing it back again, or do we want to consider the San Ynez Valley Therapeutic Writing Center? We do need public.
Public comment?
I have no speaker slips, and
There is no public present and there is no public on Zoom.
Zoom, so we'll bring it back to council for discussion.
I do have a comment regarding the therapeutic writing program. They're a great organization. I'm familiar with what they do. My only concern is that we have a protocol for applying for these grants. If we grant it to one organization, are we opening the door to other organizations coming and lobbying individual city council members whenever they need funds? I think maybe since we adopted this when TOT was down, and we needed to be particularly conservative in the budget, that maybe we can allocate another round of funds where people can apply so that it's a little more fair.
Well, one thing I'd like to declare is they didn't approach me. I approached them.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
They did not submit this year for a request.
They did not, because it wasn't felt that they met the issue of the qualification being senior. But they do have seniors. They have, in fact, they're doing a thing with the senior program. What's the name of the senior?
The
Solvang Senior Center is a specific program that they're using with the Therapeutic Writing Center, as well as, like I say, the PTSD, which includes about 4 senior PTSD vets. So I think they were overlooked. I think they probably didn't believe they would qualify because of that, and so that's why I bring it up. I mean, if we don't do something, we don't do something. But in my mind, if I don't try, then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're gonna open it to one organization, could we take a look at our budget again, and since we did so few of these grants that normally we do, that we can reconsider organizations that did not apply.
But I think this is pretty much our final hearing.
This is your final hearing for adopting the overall budget. You could definitely direct staff to come back with a specific consideration for additional funds. You do open up the process a little bit, which used to be somewhat challenging in the past to curtail. Was very smooth this year, but it is also a different year with the COVID-19. I would recommend that, for example, if you wanted to take $20,000 off of the custodial contract and return it back to prior level, we could say set $20,000 for future allocations for additional agency grants.
And people on horses could empty the trash.
But I'm saying this is still a senior issue. I'm not trying to get out of the original concept of making this, a senior program.
Can I ask a question or add to this? If separating it from the grant funding process, this is something that benefits seniors. It's obviously a passion of yours. Can this be brought to the council where at another issue, another meeting, where they can come in and present what they do, and we can look at it just individually and take it as a separate thing, aside from grant funding?
Yes, that can be
I
done.
think everything is open to whatever we want to do.
And maybe
Yes.
I would say go that route. That way you're alleviating your concerns, and they can come in and talk to us individually, and then can make a decision based on that.
I just think they were an overlooked project that is still falling under the senior concept of where we're doing our grants. So I would be fine with that, Robert.
Okay, is that the general?
And if they would.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, I'm certain they would. Like I say, they didn't ask. I approached them because I saw that they had the funding, and I felt that they felt under our funding guidelines, and it was overlooked. And I don't think that they felt they did, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Maybe put them on the 26th
Yes, you
July.
could definitely put it on 26.
Filling up the 26th.
All right.
Well, that's partly why I wanted people helping people too, because they're our social guys and they take care of not just seniors, but I mean, everybody. And I just kind of feel like we're missing out on something there, so that's why I'm trying to cut a little bit there, so.
Absolutely, we can bring that
For
on
full
26.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right. Brought it back for discussion. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion to adopt the budget?
I would like to make a motion to adopt the budget as presented.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you.
Can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Marona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Yuri.
Yes.
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Moving on to item number 7. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title?
Item number 7 is approve operating contract extensions for fiscal year 2021-22. I'd just like to pull that item up. I'll start the discussion. Essentially, because of the newly adopted budget and portion of that budget being our operating programs under different contracts. There's 4 contracts that I would like to recommend for extension today. The first contract is the contract with IDK and extending their their services being provided to the City of Solvang through December 31, 2021, as we had previously discussed. We have further negotiated the contract terms with IDK and have made some additional refinements in terms of better understanding how the $300,000 will be allocated. That proposed scope of work is included in your report or on page 292. And meanwhile, this recommendation includes that staff will continue to work on A, establishment of the Tourism Advisory Committee, and B, with their involvement, continue to work on long-term requests for proposals, which will determine the long-term desires of the city as to the marketing services, and that will be opened up to a competitive process thereafter, with intent to secure a longer-term contract starting January 1st, 2022. The second contract that's recommended for approval is an extension of information technology contract with Landspeed. Landspeed has been operating with the city for about a year and a half, close to 2 years now. Obviously, information technology is essential to all of our operations, and we do need a continuous service. Information technology is fully outsourced and has always been fully outsourced by the City of Solvang. So the recommendation here, Landspeed did not come into the city through a competitive process and a request for proposals. So based on current purchasing policy and based on best practices in order to assess whether this is the best contract that we can acquire for the city, I would like to recommend that we do open it up to an RFP process to be completed before December 31st, 2021. However, we have made a lot of progress when it comes to cybersecurity and our infrastructure in IT, and I would recommend that we continue the contract through December 31st, 2021, especially since turning over IT services is not something that can be done on a moment's notice. The third contract that's recommended for extension is a contract with Willdan for building services. Those operations have historically been primarily outsourced. So the building official, building inspector have been always outsourced, and we had an employee before who was building technician. So that service is recommended to continue to be outsourced in this self-contained unit, to where the building official is overseen and is responsible for the performance of that operation. We did contract with Wildan following a competitive process through an RFP. Our prior contractor, CodeCheck, actually terminated the contract with the city, which forced us about 2 years ago to go through an RFP process, and we had selected Wildan, which was the #1 rated proposal for the contract. So the recommendation is to just extend those services, as we are satisfied with their services, through the end of the next fiscal year, June 30, 2022. The last contract is a contract extension for urban planning concepts for planning services. And so what this is, recommendation is for, is that we will need to continue while we do recruitments and training. We'll need the continuity of services in our planning department. So this proposes continue to contract with urban planning concepts, and that's Lori Tamura that works with us as a consultant. The $30,000 is proposed to be covered by salary savings while the positions are being filled. But it is recommended that the duration of the contract be through June 30, 2022, as we'll be coming back to you with updated recommendations for general plan fees. Part of that will be the planning fees, and so there will be a provision for a direct pass-through of any costs for outside planning consultants to the specific developers for specific projects. So in the event that there was larger projects that exceeded our internal ability to process, we could just direct pass through that cost and still utilize an outside consultant. Of course, it will maximize our internal source or workforce as much as possible, so that revenue stays with the city. So those are my recommendations here. Available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Infante.
Do all these contracts have a termination clause?
So all of our city contracts, generally, we do use a standard form for the city contracts. There's a long form and a short form depending on the complexity and the length of the contract. All of our city contracts have 30 days as a standard termination clause.
With or without cause?
Correct.
That's, okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I had a couple. One related to IDK. Back on page 146, again, we're showing the adopted budget of $435,915, which is a lot of money, and that's for the entire year. At least that's what it's budgeted for. And then here in the contract part on 292, or towards the end of that, I can't remember where it was, but it's 300.
Correct.
Is that, so the last 6 months we're
Yes.
only gonna be paying 135?
We'll have to monitor the situation. The original budget was actually developed based on a premise of tying the revenue of TOT to 12%. Of
Okay.
course, we could do a lot better or a lot worse based on that. But yes, this proposed contract amendment is for $300,000 for the first 6 months, or $50,000 a month.
Okay, and then 282. Underneath attachment A on page 290, oh, excuse me. What did I see? Did I miss that? Thought I saw something when they were breaking it down. Where, oh my gosh, I just had it. They had 115,000, I thought, for, QR business code created? 120. What page is that?
292.
292. Why is mine not showing that? I thought, oh yeah. Sorry, at the bottom of the page, the external marketing and digital assets, the cost for creating a QR code map of businesses and attractions. Today we just get an email. I mean, and I know the Solvang Chambers already has that. Why do we need to create something that's already here?
So, yes, once again, as I've mentioned before, I think there is some redundancy between the efforts that are being made by the Visit SYV with our Tibet funds, the chamber, which currently the city does not contribute any direct dollars to, and then also the marketing contract. So the way this is structured is that this is a fully self-sustainable contract. It does not require any reliance on another organization. And really the $120,000, just to clarify, majority of that funding is the social media. So that is the reports that you receive on a monthly basis currently, where there is social media campaigns and the all of the traffic flow and the new followers that we receive. One of the things that was recommended based on the social media campaigns to date was creating these different experiences. So you will see at the very bottom of page 292, the design and provision of updated video and still assets, including video itineraries for City of Solvang, including these targets. So the idea is to have, as you come onto the website, these different paths of interest that you as a tourist could then follow. And it's actually similar somewhat to something that the Visit SYV is doing right now. They've also updated their website in a similar fashion.
Okay.
Chamber of Commerce QR code actually get that map?
My understanding is it does.
I haven't seen it yet, so I was just curious, because
It brings up a map of the
talking about
businesses.
creating, QR code takes nothing to create. That's
Right.
an hour or two. But the map that it brings up would take some time and some costs. And then they've got videos and still assets, but I don't
Yeah,
know what all that is.
So Chamber of Commerce has independently gone out and purchased a service which was presented to council earlier this year that creates a service basically in creating a website for each of the businesses. It can also serve as kind of the business directory. It can serve as a source
That's
of maps.
That's that marketing program that we heard the presentation on.
Correct, yes.
That has nothing to do with the QR code. They just produced a map with a QR code on it. And what I'm curious about is if I flash my QR code reader out of my phone on, do I get that map?
But is the Chamber's QR code members, or is it every business in town?
That's another question.
It's members at this
Yeah.
point. They're inviting other people to, of course, be a part of it, but I just happened to see that, and then I'm looking at the big, bold $120,000 and going, wow, that's a lot of money for, so I understand all the other stuff underneath it, so that's fine. I just want a little clarification on that.
And just to clarify, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't paying attention. These $300,000 for IDK are included in the 435,000 that are in
Correct,
the 21.
yes.
Okay.
So as you develop the RFP going forward throughout the year and we come back with a longer term contract, we'll also be monitoring the TOT receipts, which right now we are doing very well, and we'll be coming back with additional recommendations.
And one more question. And currently, when IDK does an event and they need to go rent something for that event, it comes out of that money. There's no other money that the city pays for that, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Like during Yule Fest last year, it came out of the money we paid them, not we need to spend this on a rental of this or whatever, okay?
Correct. And there is some limitation within this contract as to how much control the city then has as to what they purchased, what quality that is. So it's somewhat of a work in progress. For example, the parklets are a product of such an event of 4th of July a year ago, where there was no event to be had, and so the closure of Copenhagen became kind of the event, and the parklets were built. Now the city technically, per contract terms, owns those parklets, so that will be going forward a decision for the city to make as to what do we do with those assets.
Good point.
All right, are there any other questions? Take it out to public comment. David, you have no comments?
No comment.
Bring it back to anyone out in Zoom. Just Lori out there. Hi, Lori. Final comments? And if we don't have any, if we can just take a motion. Someone like to make a motion to approve the contract extensions as follows?
I'll move that we accept the contract extensions as presented.
I will heartily second that motion.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Yurg.
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 8?
Item number 8 is COVID-19 reopening of economy and the modified city regulations direction. So as of June 15th, as we have discussed before, the government had lifted all of the restrictions essentially for COVID-19. So as of June 15th, we now no longer have the tiered system that is applicable, and only mega events have some regulations which are defined as 5,000 people indoors and $10,000 people outdoors. So economy is reopening. The face coverings are no longer required, as we discussed earlier today. And then there's also certain changes that the governor has put into place that will be becoming starting on September 30th. And so the most notable changes in regulations there to us as the City of Solvang, or us as the City Hall, is the Brown Act teleconference meetings provision that went into effect when COVID-19 first started, to where the in-person open meetings requirement was temporarily lifted. So that is going away, and will be required to go back to the Brown Act requirements of having in-person meetings and having in-person possibility for public comment. However, we as the City of Solvang are already compliant with the Brown Act provisions. We have actually held a modified type of in-person meetings throughout the entire pandemic with various restrictions based on how strict the regulations were. But now we are fully open to the public. We also have received a lot of positive feedback for people being able to participate from home by Zoom. We did invest in the Zoom infrastructure and technology here for the council chambers to be able to have Zoom participation. I happened to find out post the pandemic that we were the only jurisdiction in Santa Barbara County that had the video available for all of our participants. So we're kind of champions in that, as others are considering allowing that. They were only allowing voice before. So as we did the general plan update, as you would recall, we did a survey of people's preference and participation, and Zoom was quite popular. So it would be recommended that at this point, since we have made all these investments, we continue with the hybrid version for the City Hall or council meetings. Another change that will take effect on September 30 is the water service shutoff. So there was a temporary provision during COVID-19 that prohibited jurisdictions to shut off water for non-payment. That is going away starting October 1st of 2021. We have some utility customers that are behind on their payments, but it's not an overwhelming number of people. So we'll start working with them in terms of informing them of this change. Now, under the City of Solvang declaration of emergency, the City Council had made some changes when the pandemic first occurred. One of those changes was by majority vote of the City Council on March 12th of 2020. City Council directed to relax certain sign and permit regulations. And so those allowed for temporary during COVID-19 informational signage, related to social distancing and also availability of pickup services. So we have allowed some directional signs, for example, with a temporary encroachment permit on Copenhagen Street. We've also allowed some of the banner type of signage that would normally not be allowed under Solvang sign ordinance. They also allowed temporarily to make private parking areas to accommodate outdoor dining and to make minor temporary adjustments to outdoor seating areas for restaurants, wine bars, and other eating locations. And then we had created an expedited temporary encroachment permit, which allowed restaurants both on Copenhagen Drive and in other areas in the city to expand into parking spaces for their outdoor dining. So speaking of Copenhagen Drive closure, that is something that has been closed under temporary provision through October 31st by council vote. Given the logistics that it takes for both the city and their restaurants and wineries to adjust if regulations change, is definitely something that we need to start having a discussion about and get some of your council direction in terms of which way you would want us to proceed and continue to work with the business community. So when it comes to Copenhagen closure, there's some considerations, and other jurisdictions are, of course, having similar conversations, as many other cities followed the same type of idea during COVID-19. For example, Santa Barbara City has just approved direction to work on a plan for permanent State Street closure. So that's the direction that their council gave to their staff. Our Copenhagen closure has been closed for just the 2 blocks and currently remains closed through October 31st. You could give us direction to either begin planning and working with the business community to reopen Copenhagen Drive, or you could extend on temporary basis the continued COVID-19 declaration of emergency for a longer period of time, or you could direct staff to begin working on a more permanent solution for that closure. So those are sort of the alternatives in front of you. When it comes to the sign ordinance, relaxed conditions right now, I would recommend that we return back and go back to enforcement of the sign ordinance at this point, and then looking for your overall direction on how to move forward with the Copenhagen closure.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
I have a comment.
Councilman Tom?
When we're looking at Copenhagen specifically, I wonder if it might not be prudent to do a confidential survey of the business owners on Copenhagen, all of them. And I say confidential because you don't want to get into wars of somebody wanting it or somebody not. But obviously it's been a boon for the eateries. I'm not sure that that's the case with everybody else. And I'm not saying that, a poll should be determinative of what we do, but I think it's something that we should take into account from the people who bought those businesses or started those businesses when Copenhagen was open. And then it was closed, and that wasn't at their choice, and I think the closure was a good thing. I haven't made up my mind yet about the permanency of that, but I think that it's important that we do hear from those business owners, and I requested confidentiality so you don't get into wars between one shop owner or one diner or whatever. And that's just a comment at this point.
Are there any other comments or questions of the staff report?
Yeah. First, we've got we issued encroachment permits, right? That's what's allowing these people to put the tables out there onto the street, and then we close the street.
Correct.
And that's in effect until October? End of
So
October?
the encouragement permits themselves don't have an expiration date. They're tied to the declaration of the emergency. Of course, the city retains the right to withdraw those permits at any time.
Okay, but I thought that the city council had by directive, I thought you said it was until the end of October.
City council directed to close the 2 blocks of Copenhagen Drive
Until the
through October 31st.
Okay. So the encroachment permit's a separate thing from the closure of the city, is what you're telling me?
There is the action to close the street, and then staff in alignment with that developed a program to create temporary encouragement permits, which are the same permits for businesses that are expanded into Copenhagen Drive and into other parking lots. So you have, for example, the Irish pub right there across from the park. They have an encouragement permit.
And there's encroachment permits on Mission that they're all over. There's a lot of that going on. The city is losing a lot of parking spaces, as we heard in the parking study. Just on Copenhagen, it was 60. And then there's some on Mission, some on First, and they're all over.
You're referring to, like, for example, Paula's and Solvang Brewery, et cetera, yeah.
Yeah. And so I, unlike Mr. Thomas, would say that I prefer it to be open again. But I do like the idea of listening to the business owners and see what they have to say. And would have a tendency to be swayed by the majority, saying one way or the other. I have spoken with several of them, and literally the people with restaurants like it, and the people that have retail businesses don't like it being closed. There are options. We heard one tonight, make it one way in the middle and widen the sidewalks. But all of this all of leaving it closed, I believe, has a cost. And I'll go back to our attorney for a second. If we leave the street closed and we have a curb there and we don't get rid of that curb or level the street off, and someone trips and hurts themselves, are we liable?
I mean, I think if it's city property, I don't think closing or opening the street really changes that, right? Like if they're tripping on city property,
Yeah.
I think that's the same issue.
But the opportunity to do that would be greater if it's all closed and it's all pedestrian traffic. It's no longer parking.
I couldn't tell you if it's greater or less,
fine,
but I
thank
think
you.
the risks are
But
the
if it's
same.
open and somebody gets hit by
No,
a
it's
car, is
Yeah.
it the other flip side of that coin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's city property, and if somebody trips on it, it's the same issues whether the street's open or closed. I mean, maybe you have more pedestrian traffic because people are walking there, but I don't know that that's a appreciable difference between the two.
Because one of the things that I think they're doing on State Street with the closure is they're paved over it and made it level so that it was a convenient walking area. Very expensive process, if you think about that. One of the other concepts is if we gave all the restaurants an encroachment permit, let them take up 2 parking spaces in front of their restaurant and put a couple tables out there and surround it, but leave all the rest of it open and the traffic open so we can park, but the restaurants still get that. That might be an option. I mean, there's several different ways of doing this, and I would like to hear what the business owners think, like Mr. Thomas had suggested. I think that's a cool idea, but I have to tell you that I'll go with the parking issue, that you can't get into parking lot 2 from Copenhagen anymore.
That's one of my biggest issue with that.
There's
There's got to be a way to work around that, though.
Well, we just
I
shorten.
think that'd
Yes,
be
we
an easy
shorten
one,
it,
just
or
shorten it.
you make a one-way line to get in, and then you get out by the park.
Yeah,
something like that. Let's bring it up.
but the other side of this that I have to tell you is, if you ever try to park in that parking lot, it's always full. So even though it's not easy to get
Yeah,
in.
no one parks there because it's full.
Yeah.
Yogi Berra.
Yeah, right. But it is an issue, I think, that needs to be addressed, and I would like to see that changed. I personally would like to see it open. That's my personal opinion, but I'd like to hear what the business owners have to say as well.
My personal opinion is I like to see it closed, but I think the business owners have more pull than I do. And if the majority of the business owners wanted it open, I would say open. And it's an anecdote, but my wife's father and mother came here for the first time in 1996. And the first thing he said was, "Why is this street open?" And I never thought about it at the time, because he's so used to European towns that had their central courtyard.
Right.
Ideally, to have, if you're gonna leave it open, to have no street and no curb, but I mean, pavers up this high, that's extremely cost prohibitive. The other reason I would like to have it open, and I've been asked this by a lot of residents, what's my take? And I say, I would like to keep it open. I'd like it to look more cohesive. I'd like to make it look more like a true promenade without the helter-skelter, this redwood 4x4 post, this metal thing here. I don't think it looks good. When it's full of people, you don't really notice, and it's kind of cool. That one picture that you showed was really cool, that it was just packed with people, and that's kind of what we're supposed to do. But I think it should look nicer.
Yeah, if we do it right.
If you look at it right now, there's stacks of metal chairs and
I know.
tables
It
out
looks,
there that are
when it's
not
empty, it
being
looks terrible.
used.
It looks helter-skelter.
It really does not reflect well on the city.
No, it doesn't. That's why, that's my biggest caveat is make it look uniform, just symmetrical, even if you will.
Well, that was what at the time, the Branding and Design Committee, or whatever they were called, tried to come up with. And if I remember, it was Rennie that came up with the ideas, and he incorporated his ideas for his bakery there. And it doesn't look bad. Still a little cheesy, I think, but it doesn't look bad. It looks better than some of the rest of them.
But if everything was the same, it would look normal.
Yes, it would. Yes, thank you.
Those things aren't cheap, though.
No, they're not. And it's an issue. But we have several things that have to be considered, and part of it is we have to give all of these restaurants, if we decide to open it up, we've got to give them time to get used to that and change things. We have to figure out what to do with all those tables. Didn't we? Those are all bought by the city, right? Or by IDK.
No, most of the tables belong to the businesses. We did give them direction to buy all black metal tables, so they did make that investment.
And the
We told them to do that?
previous council got some heat from that because some of the merchants really were against having to pay anything because they were already struggling to pay for things to try and bring in more people. I haven't talked to them since then, but that was the biggest complaint we heard at the time.
And I've talked to restaurant owners that say that they're getting more business, they've got more tables. On the other hand, we have to charge them for their license by the table, don't we? But we haven't been doing that?
No, we charge just our business license as a flat fee.
What's there is a fee of some type that we charge them that's by the table, is what I was told by a restaurant owner.
Well, they have the capacity that is regulated by the fire department. It's their capacity that they can have in terms of how many people are allowed in the restaurant.
You know what's a good example of
That's
that?
pertaining to the inside, though.
Yeah,
That's
that
the
only
inside,
applies to I believe that charge only applies to outdoor seating.
Is that right?
We don't charge anything for outdoor seating for tables.
You guys know where the Lure Fish House is at La Cumbre Plaza?
Oh, yeah.
With COVID, their seating capacity is more than doubled because they have more tables outside than inside. This is a boom for restaurants when you have the crowds.
And you have the space to do it.
But it's technically, it's not really public space, but it's mall space that they've been
At
allowed.
the Lure it is, yeah.
Yeah, to go in there.
Love that restaurant, it's a great place.
Yeah, it's reasonable too.
You guys clearly have cooked in a Solvang kitchen.
If we ever have to leave
you can
Solvang for
only
dinner.
bang out so much food out of the kitchens that we have here.
That's true.
But anyway, back to logistics, because I do want to bring back, obviously, the look is important, and the business that it brings to our local shops and restaurants is important. I want us to consider the logistics, because right now Copenhagen Street is closed. That takes up some parking, that takes up some accessibility. The other arteries, you know, the alleyways, Mollyway, the other one, those are being used for all sorts of things, for deliveries, for parking, for drive-through. Somebody moves from one of the apartments that are upstairs from some of the shops, and every so often they decide that it's okay to park their moving truck throughout in the middle of the day while people are trying to pass by. And as the city gets busier, it gets tricky to do deliveries. Some people will say that, well, that only happens during the weekdays when it's not busy, but restaurants get the Berryman and the Chef's Warehouse every single day, whether it's the weekday or the weekend. And many of these buildings don't have a back service area that can accommodate big vehicles. So,
Sounds like you're in favor of opening the street up then.
I mean, if we, you know, I'm not opposed to keeping it. I'm not opposed to keeping it closed, but we do need to address logistics, because it is challenging, and as we get busier, it's gonna be more challenging. I'm completely in favor of surveying the both residents and the business community and see what they think. Ultimately, this is to benefit them. So I'm all for sending out a survey, anonymous, let's not start a war, and see if, you know, this is worth looking into. Personally, I think that the street looks best when the farmers market is going, because you have plenty of activity throughout the town. There's a reason to be sitting outside. There's spaces filling up in between the cafes, which have the outdoor seating. So that makes more sense. And that will trigger a conversation about whether should other types of activities be allowed in the street, and who gets dibs on that. Right now, we don't like ambulatory vendors, but maybe if existing businesses would like to expand their business outside, not just for the Searing area, but for retail, maybe that's something worth looking into. You know what, we need to look at all of these things, and you know, it's a good opportunity to have that conversation. And before I shut up, whatever happened to the terrace lights? I know that they were ordered.
That's correct. Terrace lights is something that we did purchase, so we have the lights themselves. We have ran into some logistical issues as to the installation. So we're currently looking at some additional installers who are actually contractors who have the right licensing, because we are having discussions with the property owners and attaching those lights to some of the buildings. The buildings are obviously not level. We don't have any light posts that are easy to attach the lights to. And our trees are also we have some short ones. So we're looking through infrastructure and that was something that was discussed originally with the branding and design committee, and our public works felt that was doable, but at this point we are looking for specialists that can address that for us. And of course, with that, there is also the question of permanency of closure. We would be hanging them up high enough for fire truck access. So theoretically, even if the street was opened, there could still be a benefit to having those, and they could be existing with a reopened traffic street.
Can I add one last point?
What's that?
Go ahead. This may not be something that's terribly important, but with the way some states work relating to COVID, and with the Delta variation that is kind of making a lot of news lately, and other strains and breakthrough cases for vaccinated people, I mean, in 2 months from now, we may be back to square one. We really don't know, not to be a doomsayer, but do you kind of keep things temporary until we really know things have calmed down? Or is it just too premature to even think about?
What time frame do you set?
See, I don't know, it came in mind with the Delta thing scared me, and it came to my mind that, oh goodness, could we go back to where we were? I sure hope not, but it's just something to keep in the back of our minds.
I believe Santa Barbara extended their closure through the end of the fiscal year, if I'm not, for next year.
So the first action they took was just under the emergency declaration provisions, extending the temporary closure through the end of the fiscal year. Subsequently, more recently, their council voted to develop a master plan for the closure of State Street on a permanent basis. So they basically directed staff to work on a master plan for that closure.
If I can interject, we're at just about at 9:30. So if somebody wants to make a motion to extend the meeting.
We've never done that before.
I'm not gonna ask Robert to extend. Can we, I would like to bring it after this, bring it back. I see Tracy has a hand raised in the Zoom, and I'd like to give her a chance. But before we get to Tracy, do we have a motion to extend the meeting?
I'll move we extend the meeting.
I'll
Do we have a
second.
Roll call,
Councilmember
please.
Clark,
No.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes.
Mayor Potem Arona.
No.
We can go home.
Everything is delayed till the 26th. Councilmember Thomas,
Yes, I want to hear what Tracy has to say.
Mayor Euring.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring it back to public comment. Tracy
Me too.
Beard, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, thank you very much. Tracy Beard from the Solvang Chamber of Commerce. The comment is, we need to have a better reason for keeping Copenhagen closed. And the reason is, we need to have a good survey. And we've asked to work with the city to have a good survey, to have it closed until October 1st. And I think because of the Christmas season, we need to look at closing it through December. And I'm going to say that because we need a real business improvement district. And we put so much money towards what we call tourism. We need to have business improvement money spent that direction. And I think we know people are going to come, but this is one of the things I want people to look at as we go, better signage. I think what Rennie did was fabulous at his location, and I think we need to look at spending money in that direction, but all over the city. This is time to really improve our tourism district, not keep putting money into analytics. We know people are coming, and we know people are coming with programs, but it's now time to revitalize our city and improve our city. And I would like that to be considered on the agenda for the future. And I say that we put a good survey out and we talk to everybody, and we can help you do that. And just on the note, for our map did not cost us that much, and every business is on it that is in the TRCs. It's just not membership. We offered that to every business during this pandemic. So
Good.
thank you for your time.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Appreciate you clarifying that as well.
I agree with her.
Yeah, that would have been my suggestion, but I hadn't had a chance. I was going to make some comments, and it mainly was just that from the businesses that I've talked with and the residents, especially the ones that have families, they love it. The tourists coming up, they like the feel of Europe, and that's kind of what we're trying to promote is Danish, you know. But I'm only one guy too, so. But do we have a?
Well, before we go on, one last
Yes.
question. What about the signage? We got 2 or 3 different elements into this, and part of it is the sign and permit restriction use. But I think at least the signs should be that should be reinstated. Our sign ordinance, because that's been a little bit too loose.
Yes, that was the staff recommendation to lift the ease the restrictions of the signs and to return back to normal enforcement of the City of Solvang sign ordinance
If I
and
can
design
add, it's
guidelines.
pitting merchant against merchant, and I don't like that. People are upset about somebody's sign is bigger, somebody's sign is blocking my view. I'd like to go back to normal on the signs.
Does that require a motion?
I would like a motion on that because the original action was taken by a motion.
Yeah, I think we want to do it maybe A, B, C. if we wanted to just take it down the order in the way that you were in the direction, if you look at page 319, providing direction, should we remain closed post October 31?
Well,
I
if-
was thinking through December, the end of December, kind of get us through that winter time.
I agree, but what were you gonna say?
I disagree.
Okay.
I'd say through the end of October for now, and let's look at it again in a month or two and see if it's really working. Plus, we have not done the survey of the businesses yet, to see what everybody else thinks. So I have a tendency to wanna say, no, leave it through the end of October for right now.
I would agree with that.
Till we get that survey?
And we get, as long as we revisit it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I think that's
And we'll
that's
do
fair.
We'll do the private
Yeah,
confidential
we need to do
survey,
that
I think is the
survey.
term we used.
That's fair.
And maybe, as Tracy said, work with the chamber to have that done. However, we can get that working. So that would take care of A, we'll just leave it as it is through October 31.
Okay. And we'll-
B, so we want to decide whether we want to provide direction, should return with recommendations for longer term permanent. No, that's the same thing. That's basically the same part of it.
Yes,
Um,
the questions on page 319 all have to do with the Copenhagen closure, and was basically giving you some ranges as to which direction you wanted staff to go.
but then C would be the direction on how we wanted to go, eliminate, relax sign regulations, return to observance of the city of Solvang. I think I would
So we need a separate.
So we need 3 votes?
I'd like to make a motion to have the city eliminate the relaxed sign regulation and return to observance of the city of Solvang sign ordinance in full compliance, maybe by the end of July 31, just to give everybody an opportunity to get noticed that this is going to happen, give everyone maybe, feels like maybe 5-6 weeks.
I'll second that.
Is that-
Councilmember, was that in the
Points?
form of?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Yuri.
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Okay.
That was regarding the signs.
That was regarding
was
signs.
signs.
That was specifically for signs.
For the Copenhagen closure, you don't have to make a motion. I received enough general direction. We'll come back in about a month or so with results of a survey.
July 26th, we have some openings.
We'll see how much response we get.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and I want to restate, I would hope that would be a confidential survey so that people feel comfortable saying how they really feel about it without upsetting the business next door to them.
Yeah.
Might be something that, in order to also get the residents, maybe have it go out with a water bill or something.
So we've been reaching out lately with the surveys. We have over 1,000 emails in an easy to distribute database that includes utility billing customers and all our business license customers. We also post it on Facebook. So we have the tools to do that, and of course we can reach out to the chamber for them to reach out to businesses as well.
Great. That's it. All right. Was that all that you needed direction on? for
I
item
think you
num-
received
Item 8? All right.
all the direction.
Moving on to item number 9.
Item number 9 is AB 1234, report out and council closing comments.
Do we have any closing comments? Any other things? So with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:38. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.